It simply means Tuesday, by the way. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Sahara Ventures. I'm not sure if you can hear me. Can you hear me? I'm the CEO and co-founder of Sahara Ventures, our Sahara group of companies. So we have Sahara Consulting, which is a management consulting firm. We have Sahara Sparks, which is a marketplace for investors and entrepreneurs, and Sahara Accelerator. So this capacity today, I'll be speaking about Sahara Accelerator on the behalf of the MD of Sahara Accelerator, the group CEO. I'm very happy to be here, and I'm very honored and humbled to share my 2 cents. Thank you.
All right, awesome. I think in order for us, it's often said, in order for you to know where you're going, you have to know where you started from. And I'm specifically excited that Simonza and Sheila are on this panel, because I know that they've been, I would say, the bedrock of innovation in their respective countries. Simonza, you're going to speak for the whole of Southern Africa, and Sheila, you're going to speak for the whole of Eastern Africa, because Bongo Hive, was able to make it across the 10-year threshold. And, Sheila, having previously worked at iHub, I bet that you've seen a lot evolve from where things were in the past to where they are now. And I'm just really curious to have a peek into how the ecosystems have evolved, from the past 10 years. If you want to give us a glimpse into 15 years before, that's also fine. But let's talk about 10 years, before 2020. How have you seen the ecosystems evolve from the southern part of Africa to the eastern part of Africa? And Jemane can, jump in and contribute, seeing how Tanzania has evolved as well. Simon,
I think Sheila, we turned 10 this year, but then Sheila came from the iHub, which was slightly older than us. So let her start.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So yes, I was with iHub until last year when we turned 10, and I just felt it was the right time for a new challenge for me. But I think the ecosystem in general, I think in East Africa and pretty much across the continent, I think almost everybody started around 10, 11 years ago, and 9, 8, and as you come along. But I think pretty much the model as it were back then was pretty similar, almost for everybody. It was mostly to grow communities of innovation. And I think this has also coiled innovation to only mean technology because of that. Because most of the people who started in these ecosystems were predominantly building businesses in technology. And so innovation kind of, I don't know, just by default felt like it meant technology. And so the hubs at the time were mostly focusing on building communities, providing spaces for different people to come together, share ideas, easily find talent. There were no platforms for finding talent like we see now. So it was much easier. You could find it, but I mean, finding reliable and quote unquote affordable talent at the time was much easier to do it within innovation spaces. It was also a place where you could easily bounce off ideas to get feedback within the communities. But for the hubs themselves, I think grants were a bit there at the time. So a lot of us benefited from a lot of grants from different development organizations, but the models have really evolved. I think now the hubs are predominantly co-working spaces. For instance, we have spaces that are only focusing on entrepreneur support, like acceleration and incubation services. There are spaces that focus on providing business development support to startups and SMEs. A lot has evolved. Also, one thing that I think was different back then than it is now is we used to know each other, but we never really worked with each other. It was really very much siloed. It was, everyone is trying to find their way. But I feel like now with I think maybe the growth in understanding the importance of collaboration and unlocking potential for our entrepreneurs that we're supporting across the continent, it's much better to work with other partners from across the region. So I think that's the biggest shift. I think now the approach is more collaborative. It's more centered around very specific models and revenue generation, even for hubs. And you'll see a lot of consultancies, for instance, within hubs. We focus on charging a program support now. In the past, it was mostly, everything was almost free. And yeah, I think that evolution is important. We also have a rich network of entrepreneurs who are successful, I would say. Now in the ecosystem, we have almost 10 unicorns across the continent. And I think that also is important because even though they are not sitting at hubs at the moment, most of them started from such communities, and it shows the importance. I think a lot of argument is always, what's the importance of hubs? That community support. And in Africa, there's this term I've had, it's more important to know the technical know-whom as opposed to the technical know-how, because that will unlock a lot of opportunities for you. So social capital, I think, has become very important for entrepreneurs who are starting within these hubs, but also growing and venturing out. So there's a bit, I think a lot has changed, and there's growth, which really gets me excited about the continent in general. Simonza, what you?
I hope you have unique answers, Simonza, because like Sheila's finished the whole answer herself.
Yeah, you just pretty much described what has been the history of innovation hubs or ecosystem enablers over the last 10 years. We started out 10 years ago, and our key focus around the time was very similar to what was happening in other hubs. I think the iHub, CC Hub, and others being initial hubs that emerged. On building the solutions towards those ventures. So whilst you had new technologies coming to the fore, like mobile technologies, if you talk about 10, 12 years ago, was when we all started getting Android phones. Like Android then became the platform that then started becoming one. So the possibility to actually build applications that people could hold in their hand, as opposed to applications that they had to have on a desktop or a laptop, was a changer. And then that started opening up our view to what the use of technology in the world. But to do that, you need to get a community to build consensus around the opportunity and seeing whether, because then you find that the entrepreneurs can't do it by themselves. The hubs themselves can't do it by themselves as well. So they're trying to now develop relationships either with corporations, partners, trying to develop mentors within the ecosystem, experts to then come in within that. So that's what's been happening over the last 10 years, is getting that. And different ecosystems are trying to address those needs depending on what's available in those ecosystems. So you find that context-rich ecosystems where investors already exist and already looking for pipeline, already willing to jump in and mentor. The experts are already coming in to address what the jobs to be done are within that ecosystem. You'll find that the acceleration of that happened a lot quicker than in other ecosystems, where you find the enabler now has the job of talking to investors about working with early stage startups, because the investors are probably at PE level and are looking to deploy sizes of $2, $5, $10 million. And that's what they've traditionally done. To come in, bring them down to a level where they can now start to talk to startups that are asking for $50,000, $100,000, $250,000. It's a different mindset, because you're now talking to people who have just built a prototype, where the traditional investors have talked to people, to companies. Launch of the company is happening a lot faster. In our early days, for example, even just talking to government or talking to local companies and telling them, hi, we're Bongo Hub, we're Digital Innovation Hub, or whatnot, they had no idea what we were doing. This was a new type of entity that didn't exist before. A lot of them, the easiest understanding they had was like, oh, yeah, you're hanging out with the youths. You attract the youths are coming there, they can use free internet in your, they're using free internet in your spaces, and that's all they understood. So the whole idea that, you are actually building capacity, that you're actually building, you're actually attached to economic development, building companies that will in future employ people, that will in future deliver services to the public, was something they didn't envisage. And it took, in our case, it probably took about 5 years before the first corporations started actually getting it and coming to have conversations with us, where even with that, you could see sometimes it was a case where the CEO understood what it is that you do, because we've been in conferences where they've talked about digital innovation and disruption around the world and the need to partner with hubs. But the rest of the company doesn't understand it, and they're saying, "Okay, great, let's partner with you." But then they hand you over to somebody else within the corporation who has no clue why they should be partnering with you, why they should be working with you, and how to actually utilize you better. But we now stand at a point where now we're talking to businesses where corporations themselves say, great. We want your services ourselves. So not just that we want to support entrepreneurs or we want to support youths, but the corporations themselves are coming back to us and saying, hey, we actually need your services ourselves. How can we work together? What can we do? And all that stuff. So those are some of the shifts that we've seen over the last 10 years.
Yeah, I think it's my time to go, Olga. Yeah, so I think from Tanzania perspective, again, we have seen the same kind of similar changes and transformation. I got into this hub thing 10 years ago. I started my career working at Keynote Co-Creation Hub, which was the first innovation hub in Tanzania. And then I moved to Pune around 2011. So I've learned a lot with the time. What I've seen over time is that hubs in Africa have gone through multiple phases. We had this phase of like ideation was when like this was like everyone's new thing. We were not sure, every one of us, what are we trying to do? I remember there was a lot of training organized by InfoDev and the likes of World Bank to introduce new incubator and accelerator managers on what it is the co-creation space, what's the hub, what kind of service should be offered. And then we moved to a learning phase where we are trying new programs, when we are conducting different activities, events, the likes of Pivot East and others, just trying to figure out what are we trying to do as an ecosystem. And eventually we moved on a stage which I call realization, when fact started to come in, when some of the apps started to close their doors because they are no longer sustainable, they are not able to create alternative sources of revenue to be able to sustain themselves. And few hubs were able to close that bridge to move to the other side, which is figuring out sustainability and eventually growth. So what I'm seeing right now in the African ecosystem is more stability, more matured innovation hubs. They know what they want. They play a very advanced role. They influence policies. I know, for example, in Tanzania, through Tanzania Startup Association, we are influencing policies around digital transformation and regulations around startup. We are able to establish strategic partnership with corporates, with academic institutions, and we are sitting at the right place in the ecosystem right now compared to the few years ago. If you compare to mature ecosystem in countries like Finland or in the US, where university plays a very strategic role, whether it's Aalto University or Stanford University, innovation hubs in Africa are sitting at the pillar of the innovation ecosystem. We work with public institutions, we work with development partners, we work with research agencies. So that's how I see to what extent we've been able to evolve. I think the next difficult phase we are going to face post-pandemic is how do we continue to stay relevant? because there's a lot of challenges that are coming up and a lot of, if I can say, negative feedback about the role of hubs in the African ecosystem. There are some statements like there are so many innovation hubs and investor-ready businesses in the continent. You know, the support mechanism for businesses is big than the businesses themselves. So how do we fix that? Also, there's issues around how do we make sure these hubs actually deliver to the promise they are promising to give? How do they create robust programs? How do they produce quality communities and entrepreneurs? So those are some of the questions I see, at least at this phase, I think we should be able to reflect and ask ourselves. From Sahara Ventures and Sahara Accelerator perspective, we've gone through our strategy, revisited our strategy, and to try to come up with something which will make us relevant as we move forward, because that is going to be the next big test for the innovation hubs in Africa. Thank you.
Right. Thank you so much. And I like that you've touched on like different aspects that are a segue into our next question. But let me give Charles the opportunity to. Oh, have we lost Charles? Charles, are you there? Looks like Charles isn't. Oh, when he comes back, we'll bring him back on here. But I like the fact that this conversation has come from the past, more community building, into now think how to address issues around sustainability. And I like that, all of you have touched on that element one way or another, because, at the end of the day, if these hubs aren't present and having like existing revenue models, they'll close, right? So what are some of the approaches like in the short term and also in the long term? Because it sounds like a number of the strategies that you proposed here are more laying the rails for long-term sustainability, but there's some approaches in the the short term, because you still have to have cash flow in the short term in order to exist. So what are some of the operating models and approaches that you have used over the years in order to ensure that you're still here 10 years down the road, or you're still here in this present time, recovering from the whole COVID disruption?
Okay, sure. I think the easiest model for probably any hub first is consultancies. I think because obviously capacity building is important, not just for the entrepreneurs you work with, but also we've seen, like Simunza mentioned, a lot of corporates either setting up innovation arms within the corporates themselves, or setting up innovation programs that they support, either to catalyze innovation internally or to support innovation within the ecosystem that either they can at some point acquire, or as part of, I wouldn't necessarily say CSR, but in the typical sense, looking at it as that. So that is one way. I think and in this case, I will differentiate hubs and focus on hubs that are entrepreneur support organizations, quote unquote, versus co-working spaces. So I think for co-working spaces, the model is slightly different to entrepreneur support organizations or hubs that would look at themselves as such. With co-working, I mean, it's straight up space. You can provide a bit more value beyond that, but I think at the core of it is space. And it's really difficult for co-working to be sustainable, just by the way. I know a lot of people want to try that model. It's good, but real estate is expensive in the long run. And I don't know, I know in a number of countries and a number of hubs, co-working spaces rather, that have talked about how the difficulty of that. So I think consultancies is one of that. Innovation management is another option. And innovation management could be with government. We are seeing a few governments getting into, creation of frameworks, legal frameworks that would support entrepreneurs. So obviously, hubs can plug into that, but also development organizations normally look at that pillar. There's also, I think, program support fee. I think a number of people want to run different types of programs that hubs have capacity to do internally, and they can grow teams around that, to do program management, to do product management and design to build products for different organizations, and they can easily do that. But also hubs themselves are building products. I know a number of hubs who have their own platforms, for instance, for jobs, platforms for skill training, platforms for education. There are a number of platforms that hubs are getting into. So I think in the short term, those ones are a good model. And I think long term, you're seeing a number of syndicates coming up from different hubs and investment, and considering how much the world is looking into Africa, and rightfully so, they should. In terms of investment, having syndicates is a good way, because you can become an early investor in a startup, especially those that you've been supporting for a number of years, and you know their potential. And it's just that those ticket sizes, like Simunza mentioned, is still a big challenge. And that's why also you're seeing the news we get every single week is people doing Series A, people getting over $1 million, even in pre-seed, not necessarily Series A, but anyone raising over $1 million, it's slightly easier to get that as opposed to get a 50,000 ticket still in this continent, which 10 years later is a bit of a disappointment, really, that you'd assume that's something that would have changed. But we're also seeing hubs helping set up angel networks, business angels as well, networks within their ecosystems to be able to play the long-term game. So I think it goes beyond just supporting them, the capacity of the entrepreneurs, but also bringing in different partners and investors into the space, so that either you become an early exiting investor when a bigger firm comes in to invest in startups you worked in. But I think more importantly, you become a key player in the startup's life cycle, because you're an investor. I mean, some hubs even sit in the boards of these startups. You're more invested in ensuring that they are successful. And I think long term, that will really change a lot of, I think, the model of hubs. We saw iHub getting acquired twice from the first investor, and then also through another hub, which is very unique to this continent, really. And it's you will probably see some of those, instead of when you're expanding into a new country, instead of setting up a new space, there's a hub that wants to be acquired. They've built a community. It's easy to just plug and play there and by acquiring them. And if you have some capital, I think we might see some of those mergers and acquisitions for hubs, as well as the long-term strategies for hubs. Thank you.
Great. Yeah, I like that. For end game is investment. End game is how are we laying the rails in order for startups to be invested in, and hubs also to be invested in. So that's interesting. But I want to come back to you on that co-working space thing regarding sustainability, because I know Africa is a very interesting continent, in the sense that sometimes things that look like are progressive are actually regressive for us, and things that are regressive are actually progressive for us, because it seemed like for most spaces, we all know what happened with WeWork, right? With the spaces, but COVID happens and businesses are now trying to cut costs. Real estate is expensive, and some are now trying to explore, okay, can we look into maybe existing real estate in order to cut down our costs? So yeah, I like that you touched on that element, but maybe we'll see in a couple of years if it is a sustainable way to go, or if it's not. Yeah. Does anyone else want to contribute to this? Is Charles back on? Oh, yes, Charles is back on. Charles, we haven't heard from you yet. Could you please introduce yourself and maybe just paint us a picture of the different operating models that, one or two operating models that you're using in your own ecosystem in order to remain sustainable?
Okay, can you hear me there? Thank you so much. I'm really sorry. I traveled to Ghana and I had a mix of timing there, but happy that I'm here. really, when you look at, my name is Charles Taka, and I'm really the general manager of 250 startups, also in position of a network lead, trying to really consolidate and organize the ecosystem into the way of coming up with a hub network to make sure that in one or the other that the ecosystem is organized. And why? Because we are looking at now Rwanda having few hubs from the beginning, but now hubs keeps on, coming up, and different supporting organizations when it comes to entrepreneurship, and trying to see, and most cases actually, the reason why we are coming up with this network of hubs is because most cases we forget the role of hubs, but also when you hear all the funding, all the money coming into the ecosystem, there is no, it's rare really to hear that this money is going to support this hub because they do X, Y, and Z in terms of coming up with different companies on board. So we're trying to do also advocacy for the hubs on the part of the government of Rwanda, but also to different developing partners. However much we need to grow many companies, but these hubs are really struggling to really come up support the startup companies. But now, when you look at the picture of Rwanda, we are looking at either, I think now it's a decade where we're having the first hub, which is more KIW, which was a knowledge hub. You just go there and sit and craft something. And now we have seen different levels really coming up on incubation, but also on growth level, on accelerator programs that are being really put in place. And they're both combined. Some are really individual, but others are really run with the developing partners that are coming in and support them. Because again, when you look at these co-working spaces, when you look at the support in order, because if you need really to support the startup company, that's some of the requirements you really need to put in place in order to have that co-working space. You need really to make sure that everything is running. And it's a real struggle. So we have seen more developing partners coming in, supporting the hubs. For example, that KIW was supported with one of the developing partners. I will not mention their name just in case. But also we have also 250 startups. From the beginning, actually, we had one of the developing partners are really coming in and supporting us. And the big question is in more of sustainability. And when I hear X, Y, and Z hub was really acquired, I want really to come close to how that really happened. Because we are looking at, and actually the reason why I'm in Ghana, I'm trying to see people ahead of us and have been there for some good years. How do we really learn from them in terms of the knowledge transfer? And there's what Phil actually mentioned of know-how. How do we really do this? How do you make a hub sustain itself at the end of the day? And what we introduced back in 2019 as 250 startups is how we introduced the consultancy services. And as of now, we have done a couple of them, and it's working because when you look at renting the co-working spaces, again, you're going back to the startup company and they're like, I'm charging this amount of money. So if you want to come and sit here, blah, 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 you need this to pay. They don't have money, so it's not working, in one or the other. Still need to find someone who pays for them. It's a real struggle. But in the last actually meeting we had with the government of Rwanda, they're coming up with a fund that actually going to be supporting the hubs themselves, which is going to be really an interesting, and I'm looking at it at the way of supporting the hubs. But also listen to when we're in Nigeria in the AFI Lab, there's a catalyst fund that was launched. And for me, the interesting part was in the way of that this money that is really going to be given to the startup company, there is that 10% that is going to go on the hubs, because we're going to do the due diligence for these startup companies, for the investors that are really coming in. And for me, as I mentioned from the beginning, most cases the hubs, operations and managers are really forgotten in one or the other. And all our focus is on startup company. And the question is, who is supporting the startup company? Thank you.
Right. Thank you so much for your contribution, Charles. Maybe we can move on to the next question, because I still have like my series of questions here before Q&A comes in. So yeah, so we often say that you can't improve what you can't measure, right? And I guess over the years, to the question of sustainability, we've seen hubs open and close. And the startups that they support themselves, don't get to survive beyond their on what do you think are some of the metrics that like you have adopted through the life cycle of the hubs that you've supported, or even like the startups that you've supported, depending on the stage that they're at, in order to evaluate if you're actually like moving the needle somewhere, or if you're still like static. So I'm more interested in understanding what those metrics are in order to measure your progress over the years, and more specifically, I guess, between the period of like 2019 to like to date, because COVID has sort of like flipped the table on a couple of things that we thought we knew, or that we thought we were measuring accurately, and there might be some things which they've actually helped, which it has helped unlock, or some of the things which you're like, oh, that's what we're measuring, actually we're completely wrong. But let's hear from Simonza first, and then Jemani.
All right, great. With regards to metrics that you use, then is your focus. So there are a couple of things that in my opinion, that you're going to find yourself doing, is that first and foremost, there's the primary measure of whether you're succeeding in providing support towards the entrepreneur, depending on the stage that they're in. And key metrics, regardless of whatever business that you're going to have, is you're probably going to be looking at growth, and you're going to be looking at revenue, just as key metrics. Then, depending on the business, you're going to have additional metrics that attach themselves to that to do that. Now, depending on the ecosystem, depending on the business model, and depending on what's going on, is that then that's when you start to look at, if they're bootstrapping, then revenue is straight out the gate something that you're looking at, because sustainability of the venture itself then becomes important, because then what you don't want is founders failing to pitch up the next day because they can't feed themselves, or looking for other jobs, especially in the very, very early cycle. So you're going to push them hard towards making sure that they've got revenue coming in. If impact is something that you're then also looking at, then that's something that you define what that impact is, and where it is, and how they are. It's better designed very early if that's the type of business that they are. I personally don't mind if the founders are not focused on impact, because then that sometimes can be an additional measure that you're asking them to do, and which they're not really focused on, and they're not trying to do. I think people that want to do impact should try to do impact, and those who don't want to do impact, that's also right. And also because how we measure impact also as ecosystems could be different. It's very easy to get caught up in Western impact matrix, whilst we're trying to still do jobs as a basic thing that we're trying to make sure that people have. So then as a hub yourselves, then you're also looking at your own sustainability metrics to find out where it is. Now, the business model itself that you look at as a hub becomes slightly complex, in the sense that you're dealing with a client that very often can't afford your services. So it's who, then sometimes you're caught in the question of who is your client. So is it the donor? Is it the corporation? Is it are they your client? And you're always battling with aligning yourselves towards what's good for the entrepreneur, but still being able to make sure that you're delivering on behalf of the corporation or the donor or whoever it is that has asked you to do something. And sometimes the alignment between the entrepreneur themselves and the corporation or the donor might not be in perfect alignment, and you're somewhere standing in between there, and finding yourselves having to speak on behalf of the entrepreneur, because you're in the battle with them. 2020 was a very good example of things going sideways so fast, and then people still asking for measurement on their metrics. On the other hand, it's saying like, no, but the entrepreneurs can't do that because they've had their businesses affected by this COVID thing that we're all trying to figure out. And depending on where you are, it was whether you're under lockdown or not under lockdown, all of that threw things all over the place. And being able to say that is something there. But also you want to also look at what helps you to. So we've found, for example, that we're able to generate revenue because as founders of the business, we came from a tech background. So setting up tech solutions was something that was very easy to do and something that we built up over time. But getting into that and providing that as a service was. But then we find ourselves now with very real services that corporations are starting to ask for, but then still trying to say, okay, great, we shouldn't lose our touch and our focus on working with entrepreneurs. And when you talk about investment and the matrix that you measure now around working towards a return on the investment that happens, realizing that that's more of a long-term measurement cycle, because it's not like you invest money today and tomorrow you start seeing an ROI on that on what is invested. You still have work to do in being able to provide that. But also is having very honest conversations, is that hopefully our ecosystems also mature to a place where, yes, whilst hub sustainability is important and measuring what goes towards that is important, is that there's an amount of work that hubs do that is public service and that is public good. And when you can get to a place where the ecosystem matures to a place where, whether it's government or corporations, realize this and that this is important, the investment that they're making, and that you can actually deliver on that. And that's the other bit that's important, that the hubs are actually able to deliver on the promises that they make. And if we are able to do that, then hopefully the support towards the larger part, which is economic development, jobs created, whatever it is that happens, can happen. We try to behave as though in Europe, hubs are not supported by their governments, are not supported by corporations, and that they are fully self-sustainable. And then we ask African hubs to be like, find a way to become fully self-sustainable. And we're like, no, we're not having the same conversation. We are honestly not having the same conversation here. And it's a very different thing when you're an investment-led hub, where you've got a fund and then you're able to deploy money, and you've got philanthropy that helps run the hub whilst the ROI on the return on the fund comes back. So in short, I was trying to say that what we're going to measure is going to differ from the stage that you're at, what you're doing, and the services that you provide. But the key thing is to help the entrepreneurs to keep track of productivity, so that they are actually getting into market, they actually have a customer that they're serving, and they're actually seeing growth and revenue. Those are key ones that, in my opinion, you shouldn't miss.
Thank you for sharing that, Samantha. How about you, Jimani?
Yeah, so first of all, I think Simuza nailed it down. I think we need to have this honest conversation. I think people are demanding a lot from the hubs. And, you can milk the cow which you're not feeding. It simply doesn't work. And hubs are expected to design policies, they're expected to support universities, are expected to do development partners' works. And at the same time, they're expected to do the core work, which is to support the businesses to excel. So it's very, very difficult in one way or the other to do it. And this is one of the things that literally pushed us to split Sahara Ventures into those blocks, because sometimes someone wants you to do community service for free, and at the same time, they're pushing you to become self-sustaining and come up with a model that works. So splitting into management consulting, a proper company does impact consulting, future consulting, and innovation consulting. Far from our accelerator, it has helped us a lot, because it has helped us to redefine who is our client, as Musa was saying. We know from the Sahara Accelerator perspective, our client primarily is entrepreneurs and investors, and that's period. We're not doing anything for anyone else. And for the management consulting wing, we know everyone else wants us to do the work, either consulting or strategic partnership that has to pass through there, because we don't want to get distracted. So I think being able to first define what you do and whom you're targeting and what value are you creating to your client, that is the most important thing that most of the hubs in Africa needs to do if we are to attain sustainability, because we can't be everything to everyone and we will die before we achieve that. I think that is the first important point. And another thing, nobody actually knows how these things work. So I will urge people to adapt agile monitoring and evaluation. Everything that we advise startup to do, to be lean, to build, measure, and learn in the process, hubs also have to do that. You have to constantly figure out how to say sustainable, how to deliver value. There is no one method or approach that will be able to take you to the promised land. We tried to copy the Y Combinator model. It failed miserable in Tanzania. We tried to replicate the iHub model when I was still at Puni. It didn't work. So sometimes you really have to twinkle things around to get the model that works for you. Like right now at Sahara Accelerator, we charge something we call success fee, and we get startup to sign something called investment facilitation agreement. You won't find this agreement anywhere in the world. As Y Combinator, they have their phase and the KISS contract, but they don't work in Africa. So you have to find something that works in your environment. I think that's the second important thing apps needs to do, because we are operating in a completely different environment. The third thing also is to look in that pipeline of support. What type and which stage of the business you want to support? Do you want to work with the idea stage guys and focus on capacity building and skills development? You want to work with the MVP and growth stage guys and focus on investor readiness? So it's extremely important to define that, because if you don't do that, what you ended up doing, you end up to be everything to everyone. You want people with ideas to come. You want people who are looking for investor readiness to come. You want to run an accelerator program. You want to incubate them. And all of a sudden it became a chaos. So the other thing we've done, we've tried to be like super specific, especially with our accelerator. We are no longer going for numbers, like taking so many entrepreneurs in-house. We'd rather go for very few entrepreneurs, design a very robust program, have a very proper due diligence process to create the values that investors are looking for, so that we can be able to close those deal cycles and then generate money to ourselves and value to the businesses. So I think it's extremely important to be as specific as possible, because what's happening in most of the hubs right now, we are doing everything except the core business, which is to support businesses to grow. So we are calling ourselves accelerators, but what are we accelerating? For whom? We are just accelerating for projects and for development partners, impact accelerator programs. But when you come to the actual numbers, how many businesses have you support, how many businesses have been able to raise capital, how many businesses have been able to establish strategic partnerships with potential investors, and then it becomes so difficult to answer, because you're doing everything else except what you're supposed to be doing. So it's very, very important also to define your role in the ecosystem and set up those metrics of success. And also, another thing which Simonza said, and I really liked it, is we have to be very careful with this external pressure and people who are not doing our work telling us how to do our work better, because they don't understand it. You know, someone will come from the US or UK and then tell you, we think you're just eating development partners' money and they're not creating an impact. We're in the business of serving people can't pay for the service. You know, I'm operating in one of the most expensive streets of Dar es Salaam. How much would I charge an entrepreneur to help me pay the rent? So you have to think outside the margins of your operation in order for you to be able to survive. So it's very, very important to constantly do retrospectives with your team to try to figure out what works, what doesn't, so that you can improve. And you don't have to set indicators and compare yourself with the likes of 500 startups or Y Combinator, because you're operating in a completely different environment. They have university that works, they have the government that support, they have a VC ecosystem that have been developed for more than 70 years. You don't even have a local angel investor network. So there's no way you can be able to catch up. You need to figure out all these things. And finally, to wrap up, what happens right now, if you see what the Innovation Village is doing in Kampala, it is not that you want to do everything, but because this crucial component of the ecosystem are missing, you find yourself, you want to start Kane, Kampala Angel Investors Network. You find yourself, you want to start this, because those gaps in the ecosystem are critical for successful operation of an innovation hub. You cannot support entrepreneurs while there's no investors to support them in your local ecosystem. You cannot support growth stage entrepreneurs while you don't have industry experts who are willing to become mentors. So you need those to build those mentor networks. You cannot support entrepreneurs when policies and regulations, capital gain tax are crazy. So there's no way they're gonna excel. So we find ourselves as hubs doing all these things, but the most important thing, we have to split and stay focused. We should stick on doing really well the core business, and if necessary, then get other partners strategically to establish this other component of the ecosystem. I'll stop there.
Right. Thank you for such a comprehensive response, Giovanni. I really like your input. So we only have 2 minutes I'm just going to ask a question that we're going to cover in these 2 minutes before we dive into a Q&A from the audience, because we have to share the platform, guys, myself and other people. But I like to ask this question because so many times, especially I could say the past couple of years, there's a lot of like stuff going on the continent that can be very discouraging sometimes. It's like you feel like you're taking one step forward and someone just signs some paper with some policy and it takes you like 1,000 steps back. But I think it's important to keep our eyes focused on the future. That's what I do for myself. So I live in 2030, as much as it's, 2020, I was going to say 2020, 2021. Almost 2022, okay, it's where the years go. But I live in 2030, so it's like, okay, what does Africa look like in 10 years for you? I think it's important to always stick to that vision, because it's through sticking to that vision and keeping your eyes focused on that vision that, everything else, you'll work backwards and say, okay, if I want to achieve this in 10 years, this is what I need to work backwards on in order to achieve what I want to see in 10 years. But of course, not neglecting, the current reality. There's a whole bunch of gaps. But I'm very curious to know, just going across the room, across the panel, what is your vision for Africa in 10 years, in 2030? I'll share mine last. So who was that? Charles, you can go first. What is your vision for Africa the next 10 years?
Thank you so much. But just one sentence when it comes to metrics. As long as we're still pushing someone's agenda, okay, metrics are going to be really hard because to achieve, because you're really doing what you're doing because someone in one or the other. So said you to do. I need 5 companies to run a thing at the end of the year. At the end of the day, you push, someone is dead, and actually you are diverted to achieve what you are supposed to achieve. Now, the vision, the way how I look, as long as we stop pushing someone as agenda, putting that in mind, I'm looking at Africa where really we're running the hub today on our own, looking in our own, stop really duplicating something that we really have no idea of how it started, as my brother has mentioned. How do we support more startup companies and in African way, not in Europe ways of how they've been really supporting this all in Asia, but in African context, looking at the need, what they're really looking for, and start looking, because not all startup companies are really looking for funds. How do you change the channel? Because money is there, but it's not for us, And I have this experience, any investors investing in their company, and I changed the channel. Now you started your companies, look for clients, and those are your investors, okay? And then if you're lucky, an investor comes in and invests in your company, well and good, that will find you somewhere, and that is really understanding our ecosystem. So I'm looking at Africa where we can do our own things, where we can look at the market, and then really the market dictates what we do, not following someone's agenda.
All right, thank you. Sheila?
Well, first, I'm very hopeful about this continent. I am really, really excited by the growth. Secondly, I think the opportunities that Africa in general is presenting, and I hope we as Africans really can see that, because I know everybody else has seen it. We are the youngest continent and we keep growing younger each year. We would probably be we would definitely be the most populated continent in the next 10 years. So if you're looking at the next 10 years, the market is definitely going to shift to Africa. And I hope we will stop being consumers of products and become manufacturers of different products, because we understand our context, our problems, our cultural diversity and perception of products well than anybody else. So I hope, I know in the next 10 years, if we fix that, I think we will be good. Two more things. I really, really hope we will have capital that is African capital. And my plea, I'm always pleading for African investors. I know it's great to build real estate. I know it's great to put in oil and gas and agriculture. I know it's great, but please, the future is here. You can start small with those 50,000, 100,000, 200,000. Invest in African companies. You will not regret it. You might make a few losses here and there, and that's in any investment. It happens, but I hope we will have, African capital and investors who, are investing in African companies. And lastly, and most importantly, regulation. If we can work on the African Continental Free Trade Agreement and make it work for all African entrepreneurs to be able to move across the continent easily without the nightmares of visas and high costs of travel. If we can make it easy for them to transfer goods across the countries within the continent and services equally, and also talent and skill. We don't have to always export that outside the continent. If we can do, knowledge management and exchange that, preserves that capacity within the continent, I think we can go far, because regulation is one of the biggest hurdles. Yes, I know investment is big, but you could get all the investment and then regulation switches up on you and your business is dead. So if we can work on ensuring that, the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement works for entrepreneurs in the next 10 years, I think we will go quite fast. So that's my vision for policy, for investment, for talent, and for support to entrepreneurs. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Sheila. Simons, and then I'll close off with Jimani.
Sure. I think that in 10 years from now and going beyond that, the opportunity exists for us to not only build better lives for people, and I'm just not talking about just people at the top, but all the way down. I think that the beauty of the age that we're in is we can hopefully start to build for a more democratized system of access towards people getting great education and people getting better access to health, and that the informational flow that enables people to be able to do that. Because if we're able to do at least these two as basics, is that then you get a healthier, more knowledgeable set of people across the continent who can hopefully make great decisions, but it can also follow through with being able to put things into action because it's for their benefit and they've got the knowledge to be able to do it, and they've got the knowledge to be able to do so. That, in my opinion, then it starts to accelerate things. It starts to accelerate production. It starts to accelerate the value of services, whether it's from a creative field, whether it's in sciences, whether it's in whatever sector you can think of, whether it's in manufacturing. It starts to create a flywheel. So I think in the sense of a flywheel, or what we've seen over the last 10 years, is the flywheel starts beginning to turn. And I think in the next 10 years, it starts to get faster. And the work that has been put down, the rails that have been laid down, I mean, like the way fintech right now are making it possible for us to transfer money between countries at the snap of a finger, the way that we're able to now get people to start saving money, to invest, to start doing things, and technologies are being able to do that, is now what are the next things that we can do when Sheila talks about the continental free trade area, that then allows logistics to be able to move what Zambia is great at, to move to other countries, what Kenya is great at, to move towards Zambia and Ghana and Uganda or Tanzania, and start to get that to happen, but then to start contributing to the rest of the world, to start contributing value that is unique to us, that people can't do in a way we can do it, because we're now bringing ourselves to the table, and we're now being able to give ourselves to the world. I'm completely bullish on Africa, and that's why I'm spending money here. That's why I want to do what we're doing, and I'm very, 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 very bullish on Africa, and it's something that I'm willing to risk my all on.
All right, thank you, Samantha and Jamani. Guys, I want to, in the next election, I hope you all in the next elections are going to stand like for president or something and vote for you.
I was about to say that. Actually, Olga just jumped into it. So to me, I think the first important thing is leadership. If there's one thing Africa needs to fix, is leadership. Like that's the only missing piece of the puzzle. And I'm living in Tanzania. I've seen two presidents in a span of 10 years, less than 10 years. I can tell you what leadership can do. So we really need to be very careful, very intentional on how we put people in power. And that is very, very important. We need to see more young people in power. I hate politics, but most of our problems in Africa are politically oriented. So we need to find a way to fix them. So I think leadership is key, because we need those right policies. We need conducive environment for our businesses to excel. We need our boundaries to be open up so that we can trade across border. So we need leaders. I think that's the most important thing. If we can get the Simunzas and the Sheilas to make decisions and Shakas, I think we'll be heading in the very good direction. So we shouldn't be just spectators. So that would be my first comment. My second one is narrative of Africa rising and the African standard. I think we should change that. While like everyone is very happy that right now the total VC fund that's coming to the continent is just slightly above 2 billion USD. That is less than 5% of what goes elsewhere in the world. And it is almost less 10 times what goes to Silicon Valley. So the whole continent, you can imagine. So we need to revisit the whole narrative of African rising and asking ourselves, are we really rising? By which standard? If they set the African standard, when China was growing, what was the rate of growth? Is 6 to 7% okay, or should we aim for 18% GDP growth? So we need to change the standard of we are setting for ourselves to say we are progressing, because we don't need the African standard. So that would be my first, my second point. Another issue which is very, very important, Sheila touched it a bit, is tech transfer, knowledge sharing, research, commercialization, and cross-border skills sharing. So the whole aspect of Pan-Africanism is key, because we all have our strengths. I'm living in a country where 60% of the land is arable, and nobody's fighting for land in Tanzania. You know, there's a plenty of land, and you go to other places in Africa, people are fighting for land because the land is limited. But also, I'm living in a country where a city like Dar es Salaam is expected to have 13 million people to attain mega city status by 2030. Just imagine a startup from Lusaka operating in Dar es Salaam, tapping into those 13 million people. So this is what we want to see. We want to see startups moving across African cities. We want to see
innovation hubs becoming landing space for innovators across the continent where they can feel safe to establish their business anywhere in the continent. So I think that aspect of strategic partnership, collaboration, value exchange is what is going to take us to the next level. It worked with the United States, it worked with the EU, and if Africa were going to take it serious, then it's going to work with Africa. Let me stop there.
Wow, thank you for your responses, guys. It looks like a lot of the responses are really wrapped around identity, knowing who we are, what value we bring, and what value we can bring for others and others to us. So more or less the spirit of Ubuntu. There are a couple of questions that were shared. I think I'm just going to pick out the one that wasn't really answered from the responses. So someone called Josephine said that we as hubs are running programs here in Uganda, but the market we serve is not ready for paid services unless sponsored by partners. So how do we create a culture where the ecosystem values the services by ESOs? It's like business support and incubation is something that's not valued yet in Uganda. And I also think this is cognizant of like other spaces. So how do we get people to, put money on the table for the value that we offer? Hello, can you hear me? Is it a very tough question? How are you guys doing it? So how do we get people to value the services that we offer? Creating a culture where where the ecosystem actually values the services that innovation hubs and ESOs offer.
Yeah, I think a lesson we had to learn in the journey is take the same medicine that you give the entrepreneurs. What's the value proposition and value that you actually create for the client? So we have to start stripping them down to who are the actual clients. So is it the corporation? Is it the donor? Is it the entrepreneur? And what's the value that they are expecting? And what's that positive trigger that says they have actually achieved what it is that they want to say, because that's when they appreciate the value. So you find that, and once you align yourself to that, then you find yourself having a conversation about what you can deliver for them, and that the conversation you're having with an SME owner who wants to see growth is very different from the conversation you're having with a founder at the idea stage who's trying to figure out what they're trying to do. So you find that the SME trying to achieve growth might be willing to pay you because I'm in business, it's running, but I want to accelerate growth. So they can afford to pay for consulting, coaching, or whatever it is that you offer them, because then that's the value that they're keen to see. The person who's starting out, it might be a very, very different case there, and that might be more long term. Where you get them to a place where they can afford to pay for the services, or it's written in, like Jumani says, in contracting, saying that if you land a deal, and Charles was saying, if you land an investment, you land a deal, then we get a portion of that coming through. And that's the same thing, is that thinking that what we're doing for entrepreneurs, whilst we might be using the same tools and we might be using similar approaches, when we go talk to corporations, who we're talking to, what we're delivering for them, and how we're helping them to get to the end of their goal. If you're talking to a department head, they've got a very focused goal on what they're reporting to their board and what they're reporting to their C-suite with what they need to deliver in that year. Are you hearing it? Are you delivering it? And if you're delivering it, they're willing to pay for that because then they achieve their goals. So it's in short, what I'm saying is, go back to the canvases that you give the entrepreneurs and then do them on your own hub. Treat your hub as a business and do them on your own hub. You'll find where the value proposition is and how to connect with helping your clients achieve success, and that's what they'll be willing to pay for.
Yes, awesome answer, Semanza. And I like that you've wrapped it up very beautifully. Guys, this has been, I'm so honored to having spoken to all of you. Thank you so much for taking the time and, contributing your knowledge and sharing your experiences during the Kampala Innovation Week. Thank you so much. Again, very happy to be here, very excited to see what this is going to look like in the next 10 years. And let's keep hustling and doing what we have to do, at least for our lifetime, and make things better for the lifetimes and generations to come. Over to you, Esther, if you're there. Thanks.
Thank you very much for that.
Great to hang out with all of you.
Yes.
Thank you. Bye.
Yes. Bye.
Thank you so much. Have a good day.
You too. Bye.
All right then. Welcome back from that session. It's an honor to hear from all of these brilliant minds. You're welcome to our in-studio audience, and all of you watching us online all over the world, you're welcome to Kampala Innovation Week. I am Bakene Martin, your host, and I'd like to help us transition into our next phase, our next talk, our next panel. Two minutes. Let me repeat that. You're welcome to Kampala Innovation Week. Everyone joining us online from around the world, I'd like to thank all of you, our in-studio audience. Thank you for taking the time to come out here to Design Hub. We have exhibitors at the back. Please feel free to pass by their tables, get information, sign up for programs, learn as much as you can. I'm sure they'll be glad to hear from you too. Well, tomorrow is our closing day. I hope you'll be able to join us again in person. You spoil us with your presence. If you cannot, you can still catch us on the website. Today's main theme is impact. We've gone through the day. We started with job creation and the health sector in the morning. The Hive collab was sharing that with Mrs. Alan Arenaitwe in the morning. Second, we looked at creating opportunities for profit with an impact-based business. Again, that was really informative. Adore came on and serenaded us with Pombe Sigara by Mviri, my favorite song of the season. It's been a good day thus far. Right now, we're about to go into our next session, and a gentleman from Einstein Rising is going to be moderating it. He is called Mr. Patrick Seremba. Mr. Patrick, you're welcome. I'd like to have you here on the stage with us. Thank you. You may have a seat. Again, Mr. Patrick is from Einstein Rising, and we're going to be looking at stories and lessons from entrepreneurs serving with the last mile. And here they've called the last mile Wananchi. Mr. Patrick will tell us who the Wananchi are. I might be here, kumbe I'm also Wananchi. Am I Wananchi? We'll get to know, apparently. Mr. Patrick, in a moment, I'll have you call up your panel, and you will introduce them to us. Just press the button. Okay. Take it away, Mr.
Hello.
Patrick.
Well, thank you very much, Martin. Time check, it's about 20 minutes after 1 p.m. EAT. Thank you so much for joining us. Those watching us across all our live streaming digital platforms, you're going to be part of the conversation. But just to kickstart it, allow me introduce my panelists that we're going to be having this particular conversation with. First, I would love to introduce Madame Lydia Mate. She is the country director at SEMA. We'll get to know more about her when she gets here. You're welcome. You're very much welcome. You can make yourself comfortable anywhere. Thank you so much. Well, joining us also is Mr. Paddy Galabuzi, and he's from Wakiso District, and he is the district planner and researcher. Thank you so much for joining us. Still joining us on our panel is Mr. Eddie Okecho, and he is from GIZ, and he's a technical advisor. Thank you so much for joining us. Well, lastly, we'll have Madame Joanne Nalbega. She is the founder, Uganix Repellents, and she's going to be contributing to this conversation as well. Thank you so much. Well, we can, we have sanitized the mics. We are all safe. Just to let you know, the conversation we are going to be having is about stories and lessons from entrepreneurs that are serving last mile, or those that are serving the wananchi with impact-based businesses. We'll be having discussions in order to understand, first of all, who do we refer to as our wananchi in this particular context. But there is a lot that is going to be in this discussion. Just to give you a small brief, when COVID-19 hit, various communities have been grasping at straws to get the basic goods or all kinds of services that they need. And we understand that without these goods, they are flowing into different areas, and this kind of disconnectedness of receiving such valuable products can often lead them into a perpetual poor state of livelihoods. So last mile is like a final leg in point of service delivery, and it's very, very important, because when such services do not reach the last person or the wananchi for that matter, it brings the country to a very poor state, and our intent or goal to realize the sustainable development goals is then sort of not attained. Well, before we get into the actual conversation, we are actually going to be having a keynote from Mr. Paddy. And Mr. Paddy Galabuzi is coming from Wakiso District Local Government, and he is a district planner. He has over 20 years experience working there. He holds a Master's of Science degree in Agriculture Economics, a postgraduate diploma in Science in Agriculture Economics, and he also holds a Bachelor's of Science degree in Economics of Statistics. Thank you so much, Mr. Paddy. We know that the district is a central location, and we understand that you do service delivery to the very last person. So we would love you to place a little bit of context by giving us a preamble in form of a keynote speech that will then precede us into the actual discussion as we engage everyone on this panel. Thank you very much. You can use that mic, or you can take up that pulpit if you may. Thank you.
Names I've already said, Galabuzi Paddy, but I'm also for networking. I'm the chairperson of all local government planners in Uganda, those including districts and municipalities, for networking purposes. Here on the keynote address, I wish to thank the organizer for this beautiful organization, and also for the invitation, as well as the theme for Kiwi. The theme lies well with our Vision 2040, where we have a transformed Ugandan society from peasant to a modern and prosperous country within 30 years. So in summary, when you talk about the vision, it's necessary to talk about the NDP3, the National Development Plan, with the key 18-20 programs, but there's key one which concern us, the the one for digitization, and we use the objective number 5, which is having a strategy for strengthening private sector capacity to driven growth and create jobs. So under digital transformation, the NDP strategy, we are here to increase the local content and the participation. My purpose is here to see that there is participation, both the government and the community. To cut the story short, I have 5 bullets, and to summarize, one will rotate around the theme of enhancing the power of innovation and entrepreneurship for Uganda's digital transformation, job creation, and economic sustainability. The issue of sustainability can be easy because as a government, we are 100% there. We are with you. Don't say that you are alone in the business. That's the commitment. I can do so on behalf of government of Uganda. So, as we are aware that there are a number of development partners, including UNCDF, who are supporting KIW of this week. The innovation should take a little more mile to you. You have a role to play when we see that there is teamwork, or you work together, you influence your customer, and also establish business and create jobs. Not only to think about earning out of what you are doing. That one alone will take you a mile ahead. As a local government, we are government, but under decentralization policy, we come bring service of government closer to the people, service delivery, including you people, the youth, our innovators. But what is the missing link? In a nutshell, if we don't understand ourselves, we can't move. We should know that there is availability or accessibility of information or data for informed decisions. So it's a challenge. Some people go into business without having that in mind. And also to have trust and quality products for your clients, including government, MDAs, like UBOS, like Uganda National Bureau of Standards. When you are doing your things, don't look at them as enemies. Be honest to them and be guided well. Another gap which is an issue is the prioritization. When you are coming up, we are diversing your business. We younger innovators, we tend to be with a lot of ambition without prioritizing. So when you are doing business, we have to think more about the innovation, and we prioritize first before we do a lot of diversification. Lastly is expertise and your expertise and the awareness. I'm very aware that most of you are highly educated, you have skills in IT and innovation. But the challenge is, do you have the knowledge? Having the skills is something else, but having the knowledge and the capacity. Here, with that, you think about something you are working on, like for instance, the product you are coming up with. Is it 2 years lifespan, 5 years, or 10+ years? So you have to have that one in mind in terms of being awareness, and also mitigation to the threats. There are some threats we have, like if you are doing a product and another person is doing it in a competitive way. What makes you to be innovation means you can do it better, in a better way, or more effective and efficient than the other person, so you can be somewhere. But also, there are some threats like the COVID-19 epidemics. Some people look at it as a challenge, but it has been an opportunity somewhere whereby people now are becoming more digital than before. And I've been seeing small, younger boys and girls doing business, online business during the COVID time. So some of the gaps which we see could be an opportunity to us. Don't just look at the threat. You admire those threats and then you turn them into opportunities. Lastly, on that issue of experience and awareness is data collection on markets and competitors. You have to know where your market is, your competitors are, so that you change the location. You don't assert yourself where there is a competitor which is doing the same thing or a similar item, and you fight for customers. Another area of interest is your technology products for the people. Who are your clients? I've seen some people are doing innovation when innocent, when they don't. And I've seen some younger ladies sitting along the gates of hospitals selling baby clothes and so forth. So when you are coming up with your innovation, think about your clients. Are they the children? Are they the youth, the elderly, and women? More so, we have our development pattern. There are certain class of people they are interested in. So when you are thinking about innovation, think the target group which can attract the support of the funders. Second last is development and use of website portal. You can't do innovation without using social media. But to what extent are you owning those social media, like the WhatsApp and so forth? They are over 90% owned by the developers. So that you can get customers, they are good to be used, but are you protected? Think about the security of your product, or using those, adapting and using those portals. And lastly on that is looking for the way forward. What is the way forward? Because a lot has been seen. As the government, we say that we are 100% with you. If you follow the NDP program, if you follow the government policies and regulations, if you are ready, you have the data and statistics. So let us think about having our own profile. Like we have our profile as government. This is what we are shopping in order to do what? To increase on revenue. But you as an innovator or as an entrepreneur, what do you want to do? What are you supposed to do as a way forward? I pray that you have to be available to your client. You have to be accessible. You can't be say that you are serving people in Kampala and you are staying in Nakaseke or Nakasongola to meet your client. You have to be closer to your client. And also it is important to request and make a use of the district and the Uganda Bureau of Statistics. The information is there, but people don't come for it. And the information is demanded. Even for us, we are available to give you information. Lastly, but not least, application of your IT as an entrepreneur. Your innovation is, as I'm concluding, government has just come up with the NDP3 with a good reform of the policy development model. So in that, it has a number of pillars, about 7 pillars. But the big interest in that, you go where the government is so that when you do, you are communicating, you can be answered. There are a number of issues you can. Yesterday I was here when the World Food Program was presenting. He emphasized more on the pillar number 1, where we have production, storage, and processing. There is a lot of, and marketing. There are a lot of innovation we can do under this pillar. There's also a lot which we can do under infrastructure and economic services. Signposts on the roads for accidents, signposts for be aware of COVID. You can design it so that you can attract, or you can innovate by coming up with a sanitizer, which is of better brand than, or which is cheaper than another service provider. And also the most important, the mindset. You change the mindset of your people. Instead of most of our younger girls and younger boys spending a lot of their smartphone on social media, chatting, sharing photos, let them share your products. It's a way of marketing. Then also, when you are targeting innovation, our ministries are following you. They are looking at you, Ministry of Gender, Ministry of Gender, Labor and Social Service. When you talk about gender issues, when you talk about environmental protection, when you talk about disability people. So you do your innovation under there. So because you are not alone, even younger people who have not yet gone to school, for us we used to stay to play using the waste of the banana plantation as vehicles and also getting a stick and it was part of innovation to drive. But right now we are using another technology to drive, not that one, much as younger children, that was at their level. Now to be at a national and local government level or international level, you should pick up technology which can take you up. And more so, a lot needed to be invested in information management systems. Yesterday, I saw someone who was helping clients for collecting rent. As a government, we want to know how we can manage revenue, management of taxes. So you can tender yourself to the clients. So the clients, what I'm trying to say, that they are not only the private sector, but also as government, we are client. Don't look at it as only revenue collector or tax collectors, but people who are ready to work with you or to support you. And lastly, knowing about governance. Are you aware which local government, if you are looking for address, which road are you in? Which local government are you in? Which parishes? If you ask someone, where are you coming from? They can't know whether they are coming from this a sub-county or a district or a LC1. So let us know our administrative structure and the governance, including politics or democracy going on. For instance, I can be a client from State House and I wanted to come up with a product. And you say to me a product which is full of other colors. Will I be your client? So study your what? Your client. That's what I can give as client. Thank you. Otherwise, we are ready with you as government.
Thank you very much, Mr. Paddy, for that preamble. There are lots of things you have mentioned that I think speak to this particular conversation, but we'll be getting into that at a later point. So right now, I think it's time for our conversation, and I want to engage Joanne. Joanne is the founder, Organics Repellents, and Organics Repellents is a social enterprise that is trying to fight malaria out of Uganda. I just have interest. I have seen part of your work, and I think you work with people that are in communities. I want you to give us a description of maybe who our wananchi is before we can move further into this discussion. Our wananchi, or the last mile, that target audience. You please start.
Okay, so Organics is targeting the low-income people in rural communities, but because they are the mostly affected with the problem that we are trying to fight or that we are fighting. But then we also focus on the tourism industry in Uganda and outside Uganda. So we have to last mile customers.
Sure. All right. Thank you, Joanne. Let me engage Lydia. Lydia, we know that when COVID-19 hit, there was a lot of halting on a lot of things. I just want to pick from you, what are some of the challenges that you think have sort of accelerated last mile businesses? Because I understand that you do a lot of research for public sector, but also private sector.
Thank you, Patrick. Yes, we do a lot of research. We work with SEMA, which gathers citizen feedback with the aim of improving public service delivery. So when COVID hit, being an organization that relies on feedback from the wananchi, it was under lockdown, and here we're presented with a lockdown. It was hard to go out to get feedback from police stations, from health centers, from think of many public institutions where we are at. And so it made us think twice. What do we have to do? We are locked in, no one is moving at all. So we had to now start rethinking, how do we get feedback from these people? So we resorted to things like WhatsApp surveys. Because many people say was sick but had no way of going to a health station, had no way of going to a police station to report these cases. And then another challenge that we faced is many people, many organizations rely on funding. The funders' interests totally changed. So even the government institutions that we're trying to be at put their priorities elsewhere. And then we also had teams seated at home. How do we engage them? How do we move going forward? So Patrick, maybe at a later time, if you give me an opportunity, I will let you know how we overcame these challenges. But those are the three major challenges that we faced. Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Lydia. Eddie, I think you can come in at this point. What do you think is informing the starting up of so many last mile businesses? Besides what Lydia just shared, if you can add on.
Yeah, thank you very much. My name is Eddie Oketro, as mentioned. What I think is informing a lot of last mile businesses, first of all, my first thought is that there are not enough of them. I think we need more. Number two, the extent of the challenge, what we call the last mile challenges, be it access to education, health, shelter. These are the people that are often the most disproportionately affected. Think of somebody illiterate having to, okay, maybe if your parents, and maybe illiterate is a bit of a harsh word. Nowadays we use not formally educated. So if somebody is not formally educated and you're being instructed on how to use technology to access healthcare, and they tell you the steps are on an app, and the steps on how to download an app are in English, and you cannot read English. So no matter what the technology says, and no matter how, the first barrier is that I cannot read. So already I'm excluded. So how do you design a solution that targets somebody who the first barrier they have before even they consume your product or service is they cannot read? So those can be, in a nutshell, some of what we now call the last milers, people who don't have access to electricity. If your solution needs internet, needs electricity, I do not have access to electricity. So how then will I consume your service or your product? So that can be a key thing to think about as you design solutions, products, or services for last milers, because sometimes there are barriers to accessing some of your services. They have extra barriers they need to overcome before they even come to a normal level of what an ordinary consumer of some of these products could be.
All right, thank you, Eddie. You mentioned a very interesting point in regards to do with barriers and limitations. And I think now I want to engage Mr. Paddy. I know that at the district you deal with quite a big number. How have you gone about some of those? And maybe if there are those instrumental ones you have also highlighted, you can share with us.
Thank you, moderator. True. Amidst the challenge of COVID and the challenge of informal sector, when you say informal sector, it's right, we include people even who about the literacy level. Everyone knows about our literacy level. Yeah, those challenges are there, but it couldn't stop us from service delivery. We have different departments, like the community department, which can go down on the ground, who know the psychology of those people. They can go and eat and sit down together on the ground with those in those communities, talk to them, but indirectly getting the information so that we can use that information to come and analyze it and see how we can support them. But also, on the other hand, it is a two-way. Positive, I look at only the positive. I want to look at the negative, whereby because of COVID, some of the civil servants were told to work from home, but when they reach home, they do other business. But on the positive side, technology has been doing. And so far, what we've done is to ensure that we work with government agencies to see that, especially the UMEME, we've done a profile where there is power, where there is no power, so that when we apply technology, we think about technology which can go using electricity. There are some innovation which don't need electricity. I've seen already younger girls and old ladies coming up with handicrafts which doesn't need electricity. But on the other hand, water services and other government is doing something. Amidst COVID, we ensure that we bring a conducive environment for everybody to participate. And further still, now this upcoming reform of the parish development model, we are bringing the government from the center up to the smallest hub, which can be the parish level. That is closer to the people. That's what we tried. Leave alone other services like roads, schools, we've tried our best to ensure that we continue paying teachers, whether they are working or not. We ensure that we continue making the roads good where necessary, we put tarmac, so that maternal can be handled through good roads and also other service delivery, including water. And we are not alone in the business. We work with the development partners like UNICEF, GIZ, Save the Children, to see that they can reach where we can't, because also we have limitation on funds.
All right, thank you, Mr. Paddy. From your submission, I also find that I think we need to have a pattern discussion about technology in this entire mix, even from what Eddie said, but we'll get at that point. Joanne, I understand that with your social enterprise, you work with the last mile people, like you work with the community people. I just want us to give a picture on how one can create a business that is going to reach the perfect end user. Because I also understand one thing, that if your sort of solution is not addressing a particular challenge, then you might work in like thin air. So maybe if you can give us a more like a guide or some thoughts into how you can come up with a business that can best serve last mile.
I think the best way to work with the last, I think something's wrong. Yeah, I think the best way to work with the...
I think you can get a little bit closer to it or raise it a little bit. Sorry?
Yeah, I was saying that I think the best way to work with the last mile people, or to really reach those people, is to really understand which kind of problem you want to solve to them, what kind of technology, which different ways can you deliver to them that will be easily accessible to them. For example, for us, when we decided to start fighting malaria for these people, there are already solutions that are out here in the urban communities. But then, because we are not developing our products and our solutions for the urban communities, we had to really go into the people and understand them and understand what they can access. That's why you find that our products, for example, the soap is a product that is already used by even the poorest person on a daily basis. So I think, like, we need to understand what is easily used by these people. And yeah, so because of that, because we work directly with them and we really emphasize on accessibility for our solutions, that's why even for example, I mentioned that we also work with the tourism industry, like the hotels and resorts. Even us going into this market was because we were really in direct communication, and we involved the last mile people into the development of the solutions. I mean, there are ways we can reach these people in the technology they already know, or in a way they are already doing things. For example, when COVID hit us, we were affected in different ways, but because we are already into these communities, we got more responses from the last mile people wanting our product, because it could tackle 2 problems at a time. And because we saw the gap, as he mentioned, that we needed to see COVID not as just as a problem, but also as an opportunity. Because we understand the people, we try to figure out and strategize different ways we can try to tackle this problem for them, because there was a lot of information being given, but there was also a lot of miscommunication to these last mile people. So what we decided to do is to package our product with also the COVID awareness information. They didn't have to use technologies. We used the technology for them and got the information on paper, on their local radios, in different ways that they can easily access. Yeah.
All right, thank you. I want to engage you, Lydia, on this particular one. From what I'm picking from Eddie and Joanne, looks like there is a need for more last mile sort of businesses. So my question to you is, you have done a bit of research and you have been picking data in regards to all this. Is that statement valid, that there is need for more last mile businesses?
Yes, it's valid. I do agree, because you find that what one organization does may not be exactly what another organization does. Looking at the SEMA story, for example, we go out there and try to get citizens to give their voice, tell us what improvements can be made at a public institution. But along the way, we find, like when you go to the judiciary, you find that somebody does not know there is a cause list, does not know the dates that they're given to go to court, or they do not know there are certain processes to follow. Or for example, when someone goes to a police station, they do not know you start from A and then move to B. So there is a gap there. There is need for someone else to come in and sensitize the people, do these sensitizations. So when you go to NERA, this is what to expect. Or I know these institutions are doing that, but it's not enough. Many people at the communities do not know. So there is room for, if you think deep, you'll find that there are gaps in so many processes where there is room for more organizations to come in that can help the citizens in one way or another. Yeah.
All right. There is need for more organizations to come in. There I want to bring in Eddie. You yourself, you mentioned that we need a number of them. Looks like we are still having a deficiency of sorts. I would love to think that financial constraints is one of those reasons perhaps where we do not have many, because it's like the biggest missing piece when you look at formulation of startups and their success. But maybe you can share some more thoughts on what you think is the hindering factor for us not having enough of those that we need.
Several. We could sit for days just discussing the challenges, why we don't have more startups stepping out to address these challenges. Finance, yes, can be a big challenge, but there's one of the previous sessions, one of the panelists talked about the issue of leadership. I am convinced that leadership across all levels, be it political leadership, family leadership, peer leadership, goes a long way. If I'll give an example, there are trends that have caught on today that no one can describe where they start from, but in a way we can sort of aggregate where they came from. Facilitation. The word facilitation in many circles means enabling to do things, you know. But today, even if you called people to give them mosquito nets, they will ask you, do you have facilitation? But I'm going to give you a mosquito net so that can you facilitate me to, how did we learn that to get services we need to be facilitated to? So my view is that if, for example, we start to promote the view that problem, design a solution, so that we stop saying, okay, we're distributing mosquito nets. Somebody says, I have a bicycle. Can you give me the nets and I ride them in the community and you pay me because, you know, at least you have some money for a bicycle hire. But instead of saying that I can put the nets on my bicycle and give to my community, I want you to facilitate me. So how do we shift that narrative around a consumer-based, needs-based, dependence-based attitude, one to designing solutions so that people move away from stretching out a hand from begging and we start stretching out our hands to propose ideas. For me, that shift in attitude is where ideas, businesses, innovations start to flourish, because just a bicycle moving from riding you to collect mosquito nets can become already your startup capital for you to do a small business distribution right in your community where government, for example, has brought nets to distribute. So for me, it's that shift before we even start talking finance, how much money do you, before we even get there, just that mental shift that you in yourself are already a possible idea and you can already execute something, then the rest can come along the way.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much, Eddie. I can see Mr. Paddy smiling. I don't know if you have something to add.
Yeah, I concur with him, and I smile because it's both inducive. It excites me. We are not here to blame anybody, but sometimes it's us. I don't talk as government. but it's us who are the problem. I've experienced where we have development partners, CSOs, having a lot of money, and as if when they are earning a financial, it's as if they are disposing. So sometimes the method of doing things can be misinterpreted. What is important now, to know whom are we communicating to. Let us go back. We used to have this challenge during NDP1 and NDP2. But now under NDP3, things are becoming more realistic and more clear in order to achieve our SDGs. So when we look at it, with me, I'm a planner, but people can come to me, what have you planned for me? What I welcome them and say that, what do you want from me? Then we start from there conversation. What is important for us? To understand our community, to understand the people we are talking to, including our client, and understand them before you bring the mosquito net. Do they need it? Do they understand why you are distributing them? Because don't rush to distribute mosquito net during the campaign time. Don't rush to spend money when it's busy season for Christmas period. So let us see, we civil society organization, and also me as government, we plan early in advance. We move step by step. Like a government is coming up with the policy development model. And we are insisting that there is an element of financing. Don't come with the money first. Let people understand what is it. Because even some of us who are going to implement don't understand what it means. We can read it and get our own interpretation. But the community, if you go there, they know their problem. Let us start listening to them. For instance, like we've been giving money for YLP and so forth. If it's not politics, we are targeting that at a later stage, these people will grow and we start taxing them, getting tax out of them. So I've seen some private sector or younger, the youth coming up with technology like a temperature for what? Their own initiative, but before they complete the story, they abandon and go to another stage. So what is important is that as a planner, you have to understand where are you coming from? Where have you reached? And do the clear situation analysis to guide you on your way forward. But sometimes people are given information, you have a 5-year development plan, people urge you to take it, but they don't read it. Even if they read it, they can't consult. So what is important? Everybody, including me, let us use the other program of mindset to change our mindset that this is not the Uganda which we used to see. Now we are going to go another Uganda which even have the challenge of COVID-19 epidemic threat. How are we addressing this? I've seen some people praising it because they have come up with some innovation. So my humble request is that before we understand ourselves as the youth, why are we getting this money? Or as a business, why am I doing this business? For instance, like my wife is doing some informal work in informal sector. She didn't, but I don't want money. I want how do I manage my business. One of the first things I told her that you work like the Indian, earn the money but reduce the expenditure. But our people here, even if they earn $1 billion, they can spend 1.5 billion. So even if now you earn 10,000 and you spend 2 million, you spend 2,000, that means you are progressing. But the people, they don't know their status, including even those who are retiring. They can get a retirement package and just spend it within a day. So unless we innovators, entrepreneurs, we come and understand ourselves, you become a planner of yourself. Before government comes in, before the development planner comes in, you understand your problem, we bring you this, you challenge us, then we can move. That's what I can say.
All right, thank you, Mr. Paddy. I just want to remind our online audience, we'll be picking feedback from you in case you have a question or anything, and then it will be addressed by the panelists. You made interesting remarks, and I think I note the fact that before you bring money, you need to first do perhaps a needs assessment or situation analysis and get to know if money is the thing that they need. So that brings me to a question of impact, and I think I want to pose this to Joanne. Do you think the reason why some of these have not been impactful is because they have not done the sort of background research to address the actual need?
I wouldn't say that it's generally the problem. I think there are different factors to that, but I think also not really understanding the problem and also understanding the people that we are providing the problem, or they are solving the problem to, or providing the solution for, is a big problem, because you can't create value for someone when you don't understand what they value. So you need to first understand the person you're creating a solution for. So I think it's one of the major problems why a lot of startups and businesses really don't work out, because then the market doesn't respond to the product as they plan for it to.
All right, thank you. Lydia, also still speaking about impact of last mile businesses, because we understand that they are meant to impact the audience or the people that the goods or services are intended for. That brings me to a question of how do you think these businesses can best impact people or fulfill their particular sort of ambitions?
Okay, thank you. I'll totally agree with her. One, you should know whom you're targeting, what is the problem, what is the solution that you're bringing on board, and once you figure out those two, then you're able to know what your impact is. If you have a business targeting the citizens and you're not able to track your impact or know your impact, then you find no reason for being. I can give an example of what we do at SEMA. Through impact tracking, we are able to know that we've been able to reduce waiting times by 70%. One, by asking the citizens on a monthly basis through our feedback machines and also through data collectors, how was the waiting time at this particular institution. And these are some of the things that affect citizens: waiting times, cleanliness of places. So also going back to track your impact is quite very important. It's good to find out through the communities what did my solution do. I do hope I've answered your question, but tracking impact is very key, and there are different ways in which we can track impact. One is through interviewing people. Two is also by seeing what the end product is of your solution. I do hope I answered your question.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. You mentioned something to do with tracking impact, and I think we all agree that the conversation around digital transformation is one that is at the forefront, and I think also last mile businesses are trying to adopt this. But I want to engage Eddie on this particular one. We know the history that we have as a country, or even the current status that we have as a country to do with internet. Could you maybe share thoughts on how much you think this transformation has sort of supported these enterprises?
Okay. There's a story I had, and I am struggling to recall where and the company that was doing this. So they tried to address two problems using technology. One, it was data collection, storage, and dissemination. But they had challenges, like I mentioned earlier. For example, most of them, it was, I think, a SACCO, or I think it was a SACCO. Most of their members were not formally educated. So what they did, they had one smartphone, and I think it was their chairperson who could use it. So they would come I think once a week, and each of them would come with their money for their repayments, and the person with the smartphone would punch in as the other one is just saying, okay, so my money was supposed to be this, and then they punch, my name is this was the business. And so the one who was providing the information didn't need to know how the phone worked. They just need to come with their information. And that, for me, I felt was a very interesting use of technology within a context that traditionally just slapping a product or technology there wouldn't help. So I think that those for me are the different unique ways that technology can enable, as opposed to technology becoming a white elephant, because then if you just slap it there and then people are just stuck and they don't know what to do with it. But here's the one who could met. And the other thing I would add also, how technology can continue to impact lives, especially in the last mile, is aggregation of needs and aggregation of solutions. That circle model is just one example. So if you cluster needs and say, so what is the need in this radius of, say, 100 youth, and their biggest problem is lighting, or then you say, okay, if I work with somebody and then we come to meet a need of these 100 youth, can you mobilize yourself or something like that? So I think aggregation of needs, because you might find one's need is completely off, but they do have certain needs that combine all of them. Then once you aggregate those needs, then you aggregate a solution. So what solution can then meet the needs of those many? Those are some of the ways that I feel technology can contribute impactfully even to the last mile.
Yeah, I think I buy the idea of aggregation, because then it makes things a little bit easier and more practical than when you just leave it in silos. Mr. Paddy, I know that you work with the Ministry of Local Government, and you have quite a bulk of publics that you need to deliver services to. I am certain at some point you have found challenges and you've wanted to embed technology in what you do. Perhaps you can share with us thoughts into and even experiences into how that has gone for the ministry.
Thank you. Majorly, when I was giving the keynote remark, I was almost giving the position of the government and the position of the Ministry of Local Government in particular, and also I myself the position of Wakiso District Local Government. But back on the point you were telling me, since time is not on our side, let me start with this, the theme of this organization, of this week innovation. Your theme, look at it and understand it. Then from there, look at yourself that you are trying to solve the problem of unemployment in Uganda, as you, not as the government. From there, everyone will be concerned to come and work with you. And secondly, that know that whatever you are doing, you are not the first person, or you are not doing it in vacuum. There is already existing system, existing documents, like NDP, as I've said. The regulation is in place, which are going to guide you and help you. And lastly, that innovation is not, with me, I looked at it as a mayor saying that you are doing the same thing, but doing it differently. That's my simple interpretation. So that when you are driving a vehicle, I don't waste time to know how I change gears, but my purpose is to reach here, isn't it? So he has talked about how we can give service delivery. I have seen people laboring so much training people in the computer, but that one is good, but may not necessarily be important, as people knowing, seeing what people they are doing, and after you understanding why they are doing it, to see that you create an enabling environment which can change them from that peasantry method of doing it to the modernized, to the modern way of doing certain things, but of their choice, not of your thinking. Because our challenge here has been that we tell people that, oh, you are doing this, so you should do it that way. No. Let us see how they are doing it, then we innovate them. They will be appreciating their background, so that even if you reduce the fear they had to use the new technology. By the time they be aware that you are now brought in a new technology, they are already with you. He has talked about how do we handle the issue of service delivery and the people. For us, when we are trained, we are giving service delivery in the community. Sometimes they are not aware that there are some work we are doing. We first go there and sit with them and look at their challenges, and we share. They talk that they want a school here. Even if there's a nearby school around there, they want a hospital here. They call even facilities. Forgetting that if they need a hospital, even they have VHT, which is the Health Center 1 in the community. So that we have to tell them to appreciate that service delivery, whether as by themselves or whether it's government or whether by CSO. From that stage, we move to level 2 or to another level like a health center 2 or health center 3. Then we say, this is what is needed. So that in a nutshell, someone may ask you to be helped, like the younger entrepreneur, that I want to help me with the money, so much money, so that I can do this. When actually, even if you double that money, may not help him or her. So that when we are in this community, when we are doing service delivery, we sit down with them, we call them participatory planning at the village and the parish level. We understand what they, and even we appreciate their problem first before we refuse it. Then we ask them, what will be your contribution? Then they tell us what they can do. Even we can tell them what they can do when actually they have not identified. Then we identify things which we can handle. And then we take them at the higher level, maybe health center, sub-county level, or district level, or at the ministry level. So that's how we have been working. But every time, we have that backing information we should use. That's why I request the members who are viewing us that before you do anything, first position yourself. Before you ask for going to be trained in a computer, do you need it? First, know which service, which kind of technology do you need to move from one step to another. It may not necessarily be money, even it can be just sharing experience with it already. Like, for instance, some people have grown big by admiring some class people whom they are seeing they are doing certain things. But even other people, they have failed in business because they started a business they want to do like any other person. I give you a scenario that I see very big farmers going drive over the weekend. These are major ministry people going to their farms. But if it's not in that ministry, you can't manage, sustain that farm. And also you are admiring to come up to do that farming. So I request that when we do service delivery, for us we start with sitting down with those community, the citizen, as the Constitution stipulates it, that the citizen, everything belongs to what? To the citizen. Then from there we appreciate it. By the time we bring in technology, it will not like a big way in certain this region, which I may not mention, where they constructed the latrines, and with them they wanted what? They want to go to bush without telling them why they should do it. For instance, like we have competent people telling people that when you are constructing a latrine, it's supposed to be 5 kilometers away or 5 meters away from the main house. When actually, most of our houses, they are in our bedrooms. So let us think that when you are promoting technology, first appreciate the culture, the people you are talking about, the level of literacy, the level of education, and by that it's very dangerous to talk with semi-literate people. I've been challenged by the university students, especially the younger graduates. They have a lot of ambitions, but if we don't give them time to tell them that you want the government to do this, but even if you are the government, you can't do it, they will never appreciate what the government does for them. So my purpose is participatory consultation.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Paddy. I think that craft is very insightful and it makes quite interesting closing remarks from you. Time is fast spent, but I'll offer one minute to the rest of the panelists so that they can give us some parting shots. But I'll be intentional with you, Joanne. Running an enterprise that is impacting last mile people, what's your experience like?
Okay. I would say it's a journey. I've learned a lot that I didn't. I've learned a lot from the people because there is a lot of ignorance, but then there is a lot of active participation from the people. If you really show them that you're bringing a solution and you're doing it for their own. For example, I never thought that the last mile people would be able to pay for my product because, you know, they're used to being given things for free. Like they're used, as Patrick mentioned, that you provide mosquito nets for them, but they want you to facilitate them to come and get the mosquito nets. So all that background from the people somehow scared me when I was going into the rural communities. But then I went there like really motivated to make sure they value what I give them, no matter how less it is. So I think the journey is, my journey has been a learning journey and still is. It's a bit challenging, but then when I've learned that when I directly involve them, they also give a positive response to the solutions or to the different innovations that I bring up to them.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your experiences, and I think you have inspired a couple of people to now start such kinds of businesses that are impactful. Lydia, in just 1 minute, parting shot.
Thank you. To those with businesses out there, one thing that I've learned from SEMA is one, be flexible. We've all seen what this pandemic has brought, so it's good to have an open mind. Sometimes one solution may work during a certain period. You may find you have devices that work this time. The other, for another year, it could be a USSD code or a toll-free line that works. So be flexible in your products, your solutions, and then also two, be resilient. Have resilient exercises. One, for within your teams, you'll be surprised at what your team members what solutions your team members have to offer when you have challenges. And then also do your research, like other members have said. When you do research, you know the needs of your people, of the communities. Ask them for what they think works, because you may have assumptions. Many times we tend to assume if I build a borehole here, that means it will stop, the women will stop spending hours to fetch water very far, and then it will create solution X, and yet that may not be the case with these assumptions. So do your research from within the communities, and even when you're targeting people to fund you, do research about them. What's their mission, their values, do they align with yours? It's all about research. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much, Lydia. And lastly, Eddie, I understand that you work for a development organization. You can also let us into some of the opportunities that there is for this kind of entrepreneurs. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, I do work for a development cooperation organization called GIZ. And most development cooperation organizations look for impact, especially if they are looking to provide public funds. So if you run an initiative that is focused on social or socioeconomic impact, then there could be opportunities to work with development cooperation organizations. The key thing I would mention there is the numbers. I think has already been mentioned by Lydia. Make sure you have your numbers right. Chances are that the numbers that catch their attention are significantly big numbers. Are you touching the lives of hundreds or maybe even thousands of girls or boys or women or farmers or unemployed, whichever number of people you're impacting, it needs to be a significant number. Don't cook the numbers. If they are not there, say there is potential for the numbers to grow, but right now, but don't fake it. Many times they do due diligence, and it would not look nice if you fake the numbers.
Well, that brings us to exactly 20 after 2 p.m. I want to thank my panelists for being a part of this conversation, and our physical audience, and those watching us across all our digital platforms. We have been trying to digest stories and lessons from entrepreneurs that are serving last mile, and we hope that you have learned a thing or two. My name is Patrick Zoremba from Einstein Rising, and we are an accelerator hub for social entrepreneurs. We do have a call for applications running. Be sure to check out our website. Thank you very much. Nice time.
Thank you so much, Mr. Patrick. A hand clap. And your wonderful panel. Please step forward that you may have a group photo taken of you. Right then. Thank you again, Mr. Patrick and your panel. You may have your seats. Welcome back from that. I welcome all of you joining us online, all of you in our studio right now. Thank you so much for being with us. I'd like to usher us into our next session. It is the last session of the day, and tomorrow is the crowning event of this week-long gathering. I am Bakene Martin, your host, and next we have one Mr. William Yeka from Enable. Mr. William, please join me up here. You may have a seat. Today's main topical theme is impact, and Mr. William and his panel will be walking us through what the role of Enable's TTE sandbox is promoting in innovation in education. He'll explain what all of that means. Mr. William, please, you may introduce and welcome your panelists. Enjoy.
Thank you very much, our host. Good afternoon, good morning, and good evening, wherever you're joining us from. As already introduced, my name is William Yeka, and I coordinate communication at Enable. Now, last year, Uganda, like many parts of the world, was hit by the coronavirus pandemic. And the education sector, like many sectors of the economy, was affected, and this resulted in the closure of learning institutions. And to date, some schools are still closed, and a number of learners are still home. By the time schools were closed, about 15 million learners were sent home. And that came as a big hit, and of course a surprise to the education sector. And little did we know that actually it was going to take up to almost 20 months now, since the schools were closed, for this to happen. So as a result, of course, students were sent home, and as of today, like I said, someone was talking about how this year, by the time schools reopen in January, we are going to have 3 sets of senior ones. So what that meant was that schools needed to rethink and see how can they ensure learning continuity to make sure that actually there is going to be continuous of learning in the educational institutions. And now to discuss this with focus on the teacher training education sandbox, which is a distance learning strategy which was piloted by Enable and the Ministry of Education and Sports, I have 4 guests who I want to introduce to digest this topic with us. First is Mr. Ivan Kato. Ivan is a teacher by profession with expertise in technical vocational education and training, and he holds a bachelor's degree in education from Makerere University, and also a postgraduate international diploma in education planning from the University of New Delhi in India. And Ivan is also has a master's in development studies from Uganda's Matters University. He currently works with Enable as an intervention officer who is in charge of training and digitalization aspects of the Skills Development Fund, which is implemented by Enable and the Ministry of Education and Sports. If you can join me and welcome Mr. Ivan to the stage. Ivan. Thank you, Ivan. Next is Mr. Asime Abraham, who is an instructor at Uganda Technical College, Chema. Asime is an instructor who comes from Masindi. Chema is in Masindi district, and he holds a diploma, a national diploma in electrical engineering. He teaches hands-on practical installation technology to prepare youth for the world of work. He also has great passion for ICT in teaching and learning. He also has good experience in software engineering and security systems. He's part of the ICT working group on ICT. So he's actually, as part of the ICT working group, he's responsible together with other colleagues for the integration of ICT in teaching and learning and at Uganda Technical College, Chema. So Asimwe, if you could come over and join me on the stage. And finally, I have Mr. Daniel Mpata. Daniel is a National Project Officer for Enable under the Support to Skilling Uganda program, which is implemented in Albertine and Rwenzori. He's a TVET enthusiast with solid mechanical engineering background from Chambogo University. He has great experience working in industry as well as projects in East and West Africa. He's a member of the UNESCO UNEVOC fraternity and a certified occupational health and safety professional from South Africa. He currently serves as the field focal person for D4D, that is Digitalization for Development, for the Support to Skilling Uganda program. Daniel holds an MBA from Uganda Management Institute. So Daniel, you're welcome. And we'll certainly be joined by Mr. Michael Nyitigika, who I think I will introduce when the right time comes. Now, to start our discussion, ladies and gentlemen, as I mentioned earlier in my preamble, that schools in Uganda and many parts of the world actually are closed. And of course, Uganda, ours is a specific case, is a unique case because it was last year, during the peak of the pandemic, voted among the top 20 countries, the highest number of school closures globally, which is not, of course, something which is very nice to hear, because, you know, we are producing students who are supposed to compete for international jobs in the world of globalization. So, first things first, I want to understand from you, Ivan, what has been the impact of the coronavirus pandemic on the education sector?
Thank you so much, William. The impact of COVID on the education sector. I think we'll begin from the global perspective. The impact of COVID in everyone's lives. We all understand that we've lost a number of people. We've had a number of people bedridden, but most importantly, schools had to be closed, all gatherings had to be closed, and there was a lockdown. At some moment, we had situations where we had a total lockdown in the entire country, different worlds. I mean, the impact was great. Now, when we look at this to the educational system, what does it mean? We had students who have not been in school for 2 years, for the case of Uganda. What does this actually imply? That we have students whose timeline in terms of growth will no longer match with their educational achievements. We have children who have not joined school, but we have those that have not graduated. We all know Uganda has had the longest, or one of the longest, lockdowns in terms of schools are concerned. Now that means at a global perspective, we have Ugandans that are falling short in getting their skills, competence sharpened, and therefore falling short in competing for their variable jobs. I mean, at all sectors, William, COVID has had a very big impact.
Okay, thank you very much, Ivan, for that. And ladies and gentlemen, I want to introduce our newest panelist, Mr. Michael. Michael has a very, sometimes I feel like I don't have the shoes to be able to introduce him. Michael, very briefly, Michael is the program director for refactory at Clark International University. He's also the International Computer Driving License, I hope that is what it means, for Africa Country Director for Uganda. He's passionate and practices leadership development, business strategy growth, and offers business advisory services. He holds an MBA from a SAMI business school and is a Franklin Convey certified facilitator. He has over 20 years of experience of working in both the private and public sectors. He worked with the Makerere University for 12 years in various capacities. He's as a researcher, a trainer, head of corporate relations. Michael also worked with coffee exporting firm managing supply side operations in Western Uganda. He has extensive consulting experience with government, private sector, regional and international institutions. So Michael, with your permission, I think I'll stop at that. Otherwise, I think I'm going to need about 10 minutes to read his profile, so you can know the kind of person we have here. So certainly your wealth of experience is going to offer us great insights into our topic this afternoon. So Michael, you just stepped in when we were discussing the impact. I was asking Ivan about the impact of COVID-19 education. And given you come from the background of the education sector, I want to understand what in your view has been the biggest impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on the education sector?
Thank you very much, and thank you for the kind introduction. Without sounding a little out of, and I can put it like a loose, you know that loose gong that just goes making a lot of noise without sounding like a loose gong. I think the greatest impact has been our inability to act and respond to the challenge, but also to innovate around it. For me, that has been the greatest impact, because I think we were presented with an opportunity to rethink a lot of things, and we just decided not to do anything and wait for everything to come to normal and hopefully then be able to do something about it. So if you had to ask me, that was the greatest challenge.
Okay, talking about innovation and thinking about what to do about it. I know Enable, together with the Minister of Education and Sports, of course, was able to respond to the pandemic because it's one of the sectors where the organization is very active. So Daniel, if I can also get from you, how did Enable respond to the pandemic in the education sector?
Thank you, William. The topic we are talking about, I think, is very, very, very crucial. COVID-19 indeed was a reality, as we have seen globally. In terms of Enable's strategy, we've seen this very clearly demonstrated in our e-learning, or what we call the digitalization for development agenda, which was targeting directly our vocational training institutions. And through this, we've seen quite a number of interventions there, especially in seeing continuity of learning. And how was this made possible? This was made through our strategy of communities of practice through our institutions, where our instructors were brought on board to see that they are able to gain skills and build their capacity to see that they are able to integrate and move on or deliver online teaching. And through this platform particularly, we've seen that our instructors have been able to deliver this particular training through the different lockdowns. And to me, this has been something that has been a success, to see that our hands-on instructors, our hands-on people are able to deliver online training, which to me, again, helps to bridge the gap, which has been there. All of us, we know the cries of the young people out there, where they are saying it is not possible, schools are closed, but we've seen it working during this COVID lockdown. And to me, this has been something that was really standing out. Thank you.
Okay, just speaking from Mr. Asimwe, just speaking from what Daniel was just talking about, I understand what Enable implemented was called a sandbox. A sandbox, in a way, is a buffet of approaches or activities that is implemented in both national teacher colleges and vocational training institutions to ensure learning continuity. But I want to better understand, you come from one of the institutions where this was piloted. What did you exactly do, both as an instructor and also based on the activities you did as an instructor, as part of this sandbox, also reach out to the students? What exactly did you do at the school level, both as instructors and also the students?
Thank you, Mr. William. Now, in the sandbox, Enable introduced what we call the communities of practice. Here, they uplifted our skills for integrating the digitalization in the education system, in our learning processes. As you know that as we've been having lockdown, students have not been around, and their education has been somehow terminated, if I'm to say like that. So when Enable came up, they started the communities of practice, where they have taught us, starting from the basic digital tools to the what I can say complex, but it has been a process. So we've been having them on a weekly basis, and it has impacted a lot of instructors from the 7 VTIs that Enable is partnering with, in Chamber and the rest of them. Instructors have learned a lot of things, and right now, as I can say, there is an impact. You can see that they have started to scale it up, that students are now coming on board. They are able to use these tools. Even if there is any other emergency, I think we may not go into total lockdown where education is totally terminated. I thank you, Mr. William.
So talking about the communities of practice, what exactly happened in the community of practice? What happens there? What do you do?
In communities of practice, Enable gets instructors. It gets people who have the expertise in these tools. Because ideally, most of the instructors, most of the people in these schools, they know these things, but to integrate them to be used for education. For example, WhatsApp. We've been normally using it for chatting and social life. But when these people came on board, they said, hey, look here, this WhatsApp you're having, at least everyone can access WhatsApp. We can use it to teach. So in communities of practice, we've been having tools like that, WhatsApp, how to use a podcast to teach, how to use a screencast to teach, how to use Google Drives, how to use Google Classrooms. There have been a number of them. And definitely we generated what we call a Padlet. So in this Padlet is where we have put most of those apps such that when you go there, you can access all the resources. So it is like a one-stop center whereby you can go on it and get all the education resources that you need. Thank you.
Okay, because I know all these things targeted the instructors, the communities of practice, I must say. But I believe the instructors are not the end user, yeah? They are just a means to the end. In this case, the person you are looking at is the student. So how has been the reception of the student? How did they take these new initiatives that are being implemented?
Actually, the feedback we are having is really, really good. You know, for students, you know, we are in Generation X, whereby you don't need to teach them most of these things. They know them, you understand, because we are in a digital world. Their understanding, you'll find that is even better than for the instructors when it comes to the digital world. So they have really embraced it. Classes can be conducted via Zoom. Classes can be conducted remotely. So the impact has been really good. The feedback is nice.
Okay.
Thank you.
So Ivan, if I can come to you, what do you think makes this sandbox, as it is called, stand out?
Thank you so much, William, and everybody listening to us. Probably would begin by appreciating that behind the sandbox is actually the application of digital innovations into the teaching and learning. So, what did it provide? COVID provided a challenge and an opportunity to try and understand how do we bridge the gap of communication and how do we ensure continuity of learning? And that is how the sandbox comes about. So, looking at the sandbox, it ends up becoming one of the most impactful education innovations Uganda developed, but the world can also rely on. The fact that there was a lockdown and the sandbox provided an environment for continuity of learning. This looked at the learners, looking at the instructors or the teachers, but most importantly, how to juggle through the existing environment to create the continuity of learning. And most importantly, the sandbox ended up becoming voted as one of the most impactful education opportunities by the Android Education Summit last year, which was a very good opportunity for Uganda, which was a stepping stone that Uganda is able to utilize the existing situation, not to cry over it, but as an opportunity to think around how do we renovate our education system in totality, to bring in the existing technologies, to bring the world of digitalization into the world of education, because what comes from education are the products that face the world that is highly digitalized. Thank you, William.
Okay, Ivan, I will come back to you, but I want to go to Michael. You see that actually, for me, it was quite intriguing to learn that actually you can use WhatsApp to actually deliver learning. Yeah, for me, I think what in my view stands out for this sandbox is the simplicity that you can use Zoom. If I may ask, I don't know, for my panelists here, what do you think was the most downloaded app last year? If I can ask Daniel, you guess. Let me put you on the spot.
Come again, William?
What do you think was the most downloaded app in Uganda last year?
I think you can hear it loud. That's Zoom.
Okay, I think you kind of do. I don't know how you managed, but it's very good to know. It was Zoom, yeah? I was asking someone somewhere, and the person was saying that actually, okay, most of them were saying it was Facebook, it was WhatsApp, yet actually it is Zoom. So did that mean that because there are a lot of meetings going online because of COVID, and my assumption was also that perhaps people are using it for learning delivery because a lot of kids are now studying online, especially in the urban area. So for me, the simplicity of this sandbox, I think, is what in my view stands out. But Michael, picking up from where you stopped, you're talking about our inaction when COVID came as the biggest problem. But if I can find out from, how did you, in your view, how should the education sector have responded to the pandemic?
Okay, so hearing what my colleagues, the panelists, are sharing, there's work that has happened. But it has happened in a small docket. If we were very intentional, by now this should have gone to a scale. I know that you see what I'm trying to say. Because the fact that there was learning, the fact that there were certain things that we picked, we piloted, and they seem to be working, by now we should have seen a version of scale or a scale model. I can bet that most of this is still in the colleges. There hasn't been any attempt to move from the college and say, can we try it out in a secondary school X? Can we try it out in a community school Y? Because that's when you get to know that out of a sandbox, now I have an MVP, a minimum viable product. I know that making sense. At a national level, at a policy level, I don't think there is a deliberate intention to follow what is happening or what is being supported by Enable. I know Enable is very integrated within the education sector, and the work is well appreciated. But I think going beyond knowing as a big player, because we don't know when this pandemic is going to step up again. Nobody has its curve and to say we have now nailed it. Next year we are opening the schools in January. But I was reading, Botswana, there is a variant that has come up that seems to be even more rampant. So what happens? 2 years, because I attended this Enable sandbox demo, where I don't know whether it was some of these people were demonstrating or, because I was on there, and this was last year, not so? From last year to now, what has happened? And for me, that's the question. That's the saying, the inaction. Because when you demonstrated, you're not only demonstrating to mere citizens, you're also demonstrating to policy makers. So the conversation at policy level should be saying, there was this that happened at the teacher colleges. Are the teacher colleges running normal because of this? Are we piloting it in one version of the curricula or in one version of the program? So that's where I'm coming from. The second thing that I want to speak to is that we've all had our own learnings. The program that I run, the two programs that I'm in charge of, Refactory and ICDL, I'll speak around Refactory. We also went pilot mode. When COVID hit and realized that the classes are not going to open soon, we said, what can we work with? We worked with Zoom, worked with Google Classroom, and then with a partnership we have Microsoft, used LinkedIn Learning. We've ran 5 cohorts and completed the 5 cohorts, trained close to 200 people. Now, I was able to do it because I'm small. I'm not regulated. It's just a program. But that's the kind of thing I was looking at, William. So there's a lot that has happened. There's a lot of innovation that has taken place. People are building different models, but there's no guidance.
Okay, I wish someone from the ministry was here, but I will try to step in as well, just slightly. About 2 weeks ago, I was speaking to the director for basic education at the ministry, and he mentioned that actually the ministry is now fast-tracking the development of the digital agenda, the education digital agenda for the ministry. Yeah, this is something that previously was non-existent, but now given what COVID has done, and you see a lot of everyone is doing their own things. Yeah, schools are doing their own thing. And so the idea is to be able to have a harmonized position in terms of policy to guide the institution in terms of what to do, which I think for me is a positive. Yeah, that already is a good step. But so if I can come to Ivan, of course, Michael has raised a number of issues in terms of the scale up. What would you say? What would be a response in terms of the scale up of this sandbox?
Thank you so much. I think we'll also begin by what is happening at the ministry. Yes, what Michael is raising is a reality, and I'll tell you that the ministry is also trying to fast track. Recently, discussions are also ongoing to do with higher education policy reviews in terms of long distance learning. Because initially, remember that the country did not have the environment that would really necessitate the digital learning. And that became a very big challenge policy-wise. At least Makerere University is one of the few that was first to get a policy waiver to ensure that they can run the institution and also run exams. Then getting back to our sandbox, and it's how it's going to expand. You find that, yes, it began from the VTIs and the national colleges, where Enable had mandate or still has mandate to support directly. But working with the different development partners, the ideas are being marketed out to other development partners, trying to look at ways of supporting the continuity of learning. This does not necessarily come with simply saying, okay, let's try to use Zoom. But a number of things are put into incorporation. I mean, very many of these institutions don't have the necessary digital learning environment. What do we mean by that? Looking at issues like internet to start with. We still have a big challenge with internet. Yes, part of the communities of practice or the sandbox has had support from MTN, where it is zero rated to ensure that access to the learnings within it is free of charge, but this is not enough. I mean, we still need a deliberate policy to try to see how do we manage costs on internet in as far as education is concerned. But then we also have a challenge of the existing digital technologies. The cost is still high. I mean, not every family, not every VTI have access in terms of the variable number of laptops, computers are concerned. And still going back to Enable is ensuring support to the supported VTIs to have increased access to the computers and all these other digital technologies. But this also still goes back to the other VTIs, just like Michael has said. Let's not focus on the 7 that have support from the development agencies, but let's look at education in totality. How do we support the entire education system to ensure that there is the digital change all over the country? And that is still a challenge, but it is progress.
William, let me just say this, and I'm not castigating anybody. I'm not saying we shouldn't. my take is a missed opportunity to model, to learn, and to scale. It's a missed opportunity. That's number one. Number two is that there is no likelihood that we'll ever get to a point where all these things will become just there. That internet will be cheap, access to technology will be like anything. We will never get to that time. But you see, the beauty with modeling is you learn. And when you learn, you improve. When you improve, you begin to look out at a scale. So here's what I would like to think about, and we can have this conversation. Would we have some use cases that would be digital appropriate and some use cases that are not digital appropriate? Just out there. Because you see, sometimes when we say policy, we assume policy arrives and things happen. And yet from an innovation perspective, policy follows innovation. We all know that. There is no way policy can be preemptive to know what kind of innovation is going to take place. So I come from the school of try, fail, learn, improve, scale. That's where I'm coming from. So I am 100% a fan of what Enabel is doing. I'm 100% thinking digital agenda. I am 100%, all those things need to happen. But it doesn't in any way stop from trying and failing. So create a window, create a sandbox for policy.
Okay, that's a good one. I like the exchange. So now talking, I don't know whether I'm moving so fast because COVID is here to stay certainly, and we don't know when it is going to end. And we're seeing that in some countries, actually, the ones that we think have a very high rate of vaccination, the numbers are gradually even increasing. Yeah. So for us, sometimes we're saying that, okay, the thing is we are going to get vaccinated and the schools are going to reopen. Perhaps when we have the target, the number of people that the government has targeted is reached for vaccination, then we'll reopen. But the thing is we are not sure. Perhaps maybe we might, God forbid, of course I'm not saying it should happen, we may have to get back for another lockdown. I don't know how prepared we are. My question was actually going to be, Daniel, what would be assessment of the future of digitalization of education post-COVID-19, after COVID, given the lessons that we have learned?
Thank you, William. I think looking at the future and in relation to digitalization, to me, based on where we are coming from, the future is great. From the lessons learned, where you're saying, yes, amidst the crisis, we are all able to see that digitalization is the savior. Now, looking at the future, it means there is no other way. We can leave it again at this particular scale and say, maybe let's relax, let's sit back, apart from taking again the strides ahead to see that what we are building on today is even again taken to another higher level. So to me, in terms of education, I think this is the right time for us to look at what is being done, particularly if you looked at the primary level, looked at the secondary level, now at tertiary level. To me, I find all this very relevant. I mean, look at the experience of the universities in our country. Everything is locked. And so even the universities are also locked. And yet, even at the lower level, we'll be looking at up to these people to see what is it that they have been looking at. At one point, I was reading, I think it was a World Bank report, and the issue of teleworking came in many years ago, about 10 years ago, before COVID. And this is a system that we've been trying to see when COVID struck, that now it is possible for people to work from home. And now, because of the practice, because of the experience we've seen, we can see that now people can work remotely. Students can learn remotely. We can see that instructors can teach remotely. So to me, this is something that we just need to look at and again embrace in our particular ways of operations. If it means a school trying to embrace digitalization, the technologies, putting up in place the infrastructure, to me, there is no shortcut to that. I feel that the opportunities are there, because when you look at the jobs, we all see the impact in terms of jobs that have been affected. Now, there is no way if you can't learn the new skills. We are just talking about the new skills which these people have been taken through to see that they are able to continue the learning. If a worker, for example, in the industry is not able to learn and tap into some of these new skills, if, for example, just attending a meeting online, you'll see that if you don't tap into that, you're left behind just because you're not digital savvy. So to me, the future is bright. It is just an issue of us, again, putting our houses and our remote locations in order to see that whatever is being brought on board in terms of digitalization, talk about the platforms we are talking about for social media, yes, but also technically in terms of production, the new smart technologies. Now, in terms of industry, we are not talking about the old technology. Now, everything in terms of automation, this is now taking place. And you find that if you don't tap into automation to understand the chemistry, to understand the design of some of how the production now takes place in line with the new technologies on board, it means you will be left behind. So to me, in summary, I would say the future is bright. We just need to harness this particular opportunity and tap into this lovely opportunity for the digitalization. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Daniel. And Asuma, if I can come to you, I know you have been at the center of the implementation of this sandbox, yeah, because a lot of it actually benefited Uganda Technical College Chema and many other vocational training schools and national teacher colleges. So what are some of the key lessons that you have learned from the implementation of this strategy, the sandbox, as well, also COVID generally? What have you learned as an educator and as an instructor?
What I've learned, when you are using the digital tools that are available, everything is possible because there will be no limitations. You can meet people anywhere they are because there is internet connectivity. You can connect this part and the other part. Though the challenge may be the availability of the gadgets. You find that especially in the rural areas where we come from, these tools are not readily available. They are expensive. For example, affording a computer is not as is hard in the village side. So you find that there is those bottlenecks. But if we scale it up very well, it will be best. It will be better.
I have some statistics which I think a bit of a worry, and I would like to get your thoughts, Michael. Currently, only 9% of the people living, only 9% of the people living in rural areas have access to internet. Yeah, and you know Uganda's population majority are actually in rural areas, and of that, only 9% have access to internet. And internet penetration generally in Uganda stands at 46%, and I stand to be corrected. I could be wrong, yeah? But these are the statistics that I have. So given this, and also many other challenges that I believe still existing, how can the education sector overcome some of these challenges to take advantage of the opportunities that digitalization provides for learning delivery?
So I think generally, there's need for government to change the way they perceive or view internet and the whole digital. If I was to meet anybody in policy, the first thing I would tell them to do is to begin to see internet as a marketplace. It's not a luxury. Because the tax regime, the way they perceive internet, it's perceived as a luxury, and that's why you're being taxed for buying bundles, you're being taxed, like the realization that it's now a productivity tool doesn't exist. So that's number one. So we have to change the mindset of how we perceive the internet. The second thing is then the periphery variables that make internet a reality. So the gadgets. So my smartphone needs to be seen as a computing device, not just as a luxury. device. Now, when you change mindset, your tax regime also changes. Now, of course, when we start looking at some of those numbers from the statistics, there are a lot of things we can also question. So if I have 2 modems and 2 smartphones, we know from a technical perspective, those are 4 unique connections to the internet. Are you counting connections? Are you counting individuals? I know that's making sense. Now, that shift will then make a lot of these things we are talking about a reality. When one of our neighboring countries decided to make internet in public spaces free, on the buses free, they didn't have to buy. They had to work with the telecos and say a given capacity of your internet must be made to the public. And it must not be the remnants of internet. It must be quality. That when this child is on a bus from school, they can access internet and it is of quality. If the quality is not what has been agreed, you're penalized. So at a leadership level, there must be mind shift. Finally, William and colleagues, is that if we're going to drive penetration, then we must also invest in digital skilling. And I'm not saying people must be computer savvy. No. People must have a level of awareness of the value of computers, one, but also computational applications. Because a lot of people are on Facebook, but they don't see the market value of Facebook. They don't see the business value of Facebook. A lot of people are using Gmail, but they don't realize the productivity capacity that Gmail has. And yet, just because you sign on to Gmail, all these things become accessible to you. So digital literacy must become a national agenda. And finally, if this is going to be a digital-driven economy, then we must enable all the critical components that make it come to life.
Okay, very valid points you raised there. And I think talking about the mindset, I was somewhere in another platform, and one of the things that I think this does not actually only, I think perhaps it also needs to reach down to even the parents, yeah? So I think time has come when, because back then there was this mindset, and I think a lot of parents still have that buying a smartphone for your kid and having it, making sure the kid has access to internet is going to expose them to, of course, bad stuff, which of course is true, certainly if it is mismanaged. But now is the time perhaps also this is something that we need to change, because we have seen the power that actually these smartphones can have on the internet in facilitating learning. So that's something certainly for us to reflect about. And about 2 weeks ago, I was reading the papers, and the First Lady was talking about was going to plan to engage with the telecos to see how actually they can reduce the cost of internet for education purposes. Yeah, how easy that will be, of course, is yet another debate for another day.
So do you know actually the tax regime recognizes education institutions and they are not taxed the new excise duty? But you see, again, here, because where does education take place? Is it confined in the school, or education is also taking place at home? So if you tell me only schools can benefit from that internet education benefit, where do you leave me as a parent? It's just not investing depth in understanding the critical value of internet. And apologies for taking a lot of time, but these are things that, get me a little bit unnerved. But thank you, William.
All right. So, Ivan, one thing I know for sure is that there are certainly going to be a lot of challenges. And you know how government processes work. And while the intention might be there, it will take a lot of time. I always like to see that we are very solution-oriented, yeah? For me, in my daily life, I like solutions, yeah? So given the challenges that still exist, what is it that within the schools, Ivan, what can they do to be able to...
Not all schools, for instance, classes. Question. Reality. It's in classrooms built, has to show studying throughout.
So, Daniel, you seem to...
Guiding the mindset is home. ICT skills, but this ICT in particular to ensure that it drives. So to me, I think up to date.
Daniel, our stairs, which I think is rural areas, you can...
Schools. In here, it's basically the platform, I think a pilot to ensure that they are all reached to me through that avenue kickstart. And this is how we in their means to ensure that they free Wi-Fi. In this particular case,
a little. I think audience of the students. However, cost itself, areas where coverage was to reach those that were to the general, and that's why
a survey that enabled it to that train secondary school that was done. There were 10 students who were ready to, but certainly, vocational training schools are better than this, and certainly, and as well under Simwe. Yeah? How is it in practice? What happens
in terms of platform, and that we feel now they tailor-made. What is it? So you pick out Matoke this particular way, that forms like WhatsApp. Start with the platform, a link.
Giving a very brief introduction in vocation, because as you know, one of the challenges technology earlier to be able to
platforms, you put them to YouTube, the links. Have been doing the education. Instead of doing creative, you find that if you have
and doesn't work,
the opportunity can use for comparison with impacted education of computer. It's a very big impact.
And why should it matter?
Why should electricity life do? There are probably more than 50 applications. And I think to your question, to your comment, technology is not our biggest problem in it. We try it.
I know during the lockdown institutions, which I may not have mentioned, schools are reopening and because
that set means where is there will be a few documents hoping for a miracle, such if I'm a pine or framework for you to. My big brothers here, different entities.
About growth and innovation. So this is what we're discussing. As
people here in Kampala still don't have access.
From iVenture Africa and Startup Uganda. I'll read you a statistic. A study by World Bank showed that developed countries like the US, every time broadband penetration rises 10%, so penetrated on roads. My comment. That's a rhetorical needs to go, could start by take us to the next level. What are the steps? How do we then?
Thank was the platform. We have been seeing a lot of learners searching because parents were looking for something for their children. Yeah, so I think it is